I stood in my custom silk gown, raising a glass to the man I was supposed to marry in 24 hours, only to have him hand me a $150,000 invoice and cancel our wedding in front of our entire family. He laughed, calling me a public relations liability who could never fit into his elite corporate world. He had no idea that by the very next night, I would be walking down the aisle with his billionaire boss, turning their smug laughter into pure suffocating panic. Before I tell you exactly how I dismantled their fake empire in a single day, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe if you believe karma is best served ice cold. My name is Kiara. I am 35 years old, and until last Friday night, I believed I had finally secured the life I had spent over a decade bleeding for. The rehearsal dinner was held in the grand ballroom of the Oak Grove Country Club, a venue dripping with crystal chandeliers, vaulted ceilings, and an undeniable air of old money exclusion. I sat at the head of a massive mahogany table surrounded by 50 of our closest friends and family members. The champagne was flowing, the string quartet was playing softly in the background, and everything felt entirely perfect. I raised my flute of vintage Dom Perignon, smiling as my fiancé Julian stood up and tapped his spoon against his crystal glass. The room immediately fell into a respectful silence. Julian was a striking man, impeccably dressed in a bespoke charcoal suit, carrying himself with the kind of practiced arrogance that corporate America tends to reward. We had been together for 3 years, and tomorrow we were supposed to stand before 200 guests and say our vows. I expected him to say he loved me. I expected a charming anecdote about how we met or a heartfelt toast to our future. Instead, his expression was completely devoid of warmth. He did not look at me with love. He looked at me the way an executive looks at a failing quarterly report. Julian reached into his suit jacket, pulled out a thick black leather binder, and slid it directly across the polished mahogany table. It stopped right in front of my dinner plate, knocking over a single white rose from the centerpiece. "I am canceling the wedding," Kiara Julian announced. His voice was steady, amplified by the microphone echoing off the high ceilings of the ballroom. A collective gasp rippled through the room. My heart stopped beating. I stared at him, my mind scrambling to process the words, thinking this had to be some sort of horrible, incredibly misguided prank. But Julian did not smile. He adjusted his cuffs, his gaze sweeping over my family and his colleagues with chilling calmness. "I am up for a vice president position at Zenith Capital next month." Julian continued speaking into the microphone, as if he were giving a keynote address. "Our CEO Sterling requires his executive circle to project a very specific, refined, high society image. After careful consideration, I have realized that you are a public relations liability. I need a corporate asset, Kiara, not a woman who is constantly rough around the edges." The silence in the room was deafening. I could feel the blood rushing to my face, a hot wave of public humiliation washing over me. He was standing in front of my aunts, my uncles, and my professional peers, reducing my entire existence to a corporate deficit. "You are too loud, you are too independent, and frankly, you do not possess the pedigree required to stand beside a future vice president." Julian sneered, his voice laced with absolute contempt. "Your little boutique crisis management firm is a glorified hobby. You hustle like someone who is desperate because you are. You do not understand how real wealth operates. You do not know how to play the game, and I cannot allow your lack of polish to drag down my trajectory." I sat frozen. I had spent the last 7 years building my public relations and crisis management firm from absolute scratch. I had worked 18-hour days navigating the grueling reality of being a Black woman in a cutthroat industry, fighting for every single contract, every shred of respect. I had pulled politicians out of scandals-guided corporations through financial ruins and managed the optics for some of the most powerful people on the East Coast. My firm was not a hobby. It was my life. And yet here was the man I loved dismissing my blood, sweat, and tears as a ghetto embarrassment in front of a room full of people. I looked down at the black leather binder he had slid across the table. My hands were trembling slightly, but I forced myself to open it. I expected to find annulment papers or perhaps some formal cancellation documents from the venue. Instead, I found an itemized invoice. The total at the bottom read $150,000. I looked up, my voice barely a whisper. "What is this, Julian?" "That is the bill," he replied, crossing his arms over his chest. "I expect you to reimburse my family for the deposits by the end of the week. The custom floral arrangements, the imported truffles, the deposits for the string quartet, all of it. Since your behavior and your unrefined background are the reasons I am forced to terminate this relationship, you will bear the financial burden of the cancellation." He was demanding I pay for a wedding he was canceling. He was holding me financially hostage while actively humiliating me in front of our guests. I looked around the table, desperately seeking a lifeline. I looked toward my family, expecting outrage. I expected my aunts to stand up and shout. I expected my mother to rush to my side to defend her daughter from this horrific public degradation. We were supposed to be family. We were supposed to protect each other. Instead, my mother Yvonne casually picked up her glass of Chardonnay. She took a slow, deliberate sip, letting the silence stretch out, allowing my humiliation to deepen. She set the glass down and smoothed the fabric of her expensive silk dress, a dress I had paid for. "Julian is right," Yvonne said, her voice carrying effortlessly across the quiet room. The words hit me harder than Julian's entire speech. I stared at my mother, unable to comprehend what was happening. "I always told you that you were too loud and too stubborn to keep a successful man," Yvonne continued, shaking her head with an air of theatrical disappointment. "You never learned how to soften yourself. You never learned how to be a proper wife. I always said you would ruin this opportunity, and look what you have done. You have embarrassed us all." She was not defending me. She was aligning herself with the man who had just crushed me. But then again, I should have expected nothing less from her. Across the table, my sister Chantel leaned forward. Chantel was the undeniable golden child, a woman who had never worked a day in her life, but demanded the respect of a queen. She sat next to her white husband Preston, a man who constantly bragged about his so-called old money lineage. Chantel smirked, a vicious, delighted expression lighting up her perfectly contoured face. "You really thought you could pull off playing high society?" Chantel mocked, her laughter tinkling like broken glass. "You belong in the trenches, not in a country club." Preston chuckled, swirling his bourbon. He leaned over to Julian, speaking loudly enough for the entire head table to hear. "I told you she was a bad investment, man. You cannot turn a street hustler into an executive wife. You dodged a massive bullet." Laughter erupted around the table. My mother smiled softly at Preston's cruel joke. Julian stood taller, validating his horrific actions with my own family's applause. They were mocking me. They were openly, gleefully tearing me down, treating me like a charity case that had overstayed her welcome. They expected me to break. They expected me to burst into tears, to beg for Julian's forgiveness, or to run out of the ballroom in shame, confirming their narrative of the emotional, unstable black woman who could not handle the pressure of their elite world. But I did not cry. The shock evaporated instantly, replaced by a cold, calculating clarity. I slowly closed the leather binder. I reached into my designer clutch and pulled out a sleek, solid black titanium card. I tossed it onto the center of the mahogany table. It landed with a heavy metallic thud that cut straight through their laughter. "Charge the card, Julian," I said, my voice dangerously calm and entirely steady. "Charge every single penny. But before you do, you might want to check who actually owns Zenith Capital's public relations contracts before you ever fix your mouth to call me a liability again." Chantel's hand slams against the mahogany table, rattling the fine crystal and breaking the heavy silence that followed my solid black titanium card hitting the leather binder. She points a perfectly manicured finger at me, her face flushed with a mixture of indignation and pure, unfiltered jealousy. "Stop bluffing, Kiara. You run a tiny freelance firm out of a shared co-working space. You do not have that kind of money. You are just throwing a tantrum because Preston just bought me a brand new Tesla and Julian is about to leave you practically homeless." I look at my older sister, really look at her. Chantel has always been the undisputed golden child of our family. She is the woman who never had to hustle, never had to stay up until 3 in the morning drafting pitch decks, and never had to fight for a single thing in her entire life. She was handed the world on a silver platter paid for by the sweat off my back. A tiny freelance firm, I repeat my voice dangerously even. Is that what you tell yourself to feel better, Chantel? Or is that what our mother told you so you would not feel guilty about the fact that she drained my entire college savings account to pay for your lavish destination wedding? Gasps echo from the surrounding tables. The wealthy country club guests, Julian's ambitious colleagues, and our extended family lean in completely captivated by the unraveling drama. I turn my gaze to my mother. Yvonne sits there in her tailored silk suit, her face a mask of aristocratic indifference. She slowly lifts her glass of Chardonnay, takes a delicate sip, and refuses to meet my eyes. She is not going to deny it because she knows I have the bank statements to prove it. You needed a massive, over-the-top wedding to secure Preston. I say my words slicing through the tense air in the ballroom. And Yvonne decided that your social climbing was a better investment than my education. You left me with absolutely nothing. I had to build my crisis management firm from the mud. I took out predatory loans. I worked 3 jobs. I scrubbed floors in a commercial building at midnight just to afford my textbooks, and I ate ramen noodles in a freezing studio apartment while you were flying first class to your honeymoon in the Maldives on my dime. Instead of showing a single ounce of remorse, my mother sets her wine glass down with a sharp clink. She looks at me with that familiar, icy disdain she has reserved for me since childhood. Julian is absolutely right about you. Yvonne says, her voice carrying an air of absolute finality. I always told you that you were too loud, too independent, and simply too stubborn to keep a successful man. A man like Julian needs a partner who knows how to be supportive, not a woman who insists on fighting everyone in the room. I always knew you would ruin this. You lack the grace required for this level of society. I stare at the woman who gave birth to me. The betrayal is a physical weight crushing against my chest, but I refuse to let it show on my face. I refuse to give them the satisfaction of my tears. Next to Chantel, her husband Preston lets out a low, condescending chuckle. Preston is a mediocre real estate agent who constantly flaunts his fake old money background. He wears tweed jackets and talks about his family's non-existent legacy in Nantucket, all while living off the credit cards Yvonne so generously pays off for him every month. I told you she was a bad investment, Julian. Preston sneers, swirling the amber liquid in his crystal bourbon glass. You cannot bring a woman like Kiara into the executive suite. She does not know how to play the game. She is a massive liability. You are making the smart corporate play here, man. Cut your losses before she tanks your promotion. Julian smiles, clearly emboldened by the unwavering support of my toxic family. He completely ignores my comment about owning Zenith Capital's public relations contracts, treating it like the desperate lie of a jilted bride trying to save face. I am glad we are all on the same page, Julian says, aggressively smoothing his suit lapels. Because I am not just canceling the wedding, Kiara, I am taking over the venue. I raise an eyebrow, watching him puff out his chest. Taking over the venue. Exactly! Julian replies, his tone dripping with unchecked corporate arrogance. My CEO, Sterling, is flying in tomorrow. I need to lock in this vice president promotion and hosting an elite high-level corporate retreat for him, and the executive board is exactly how I'm going to do it. The imported white orchids, the 5-course catering, the string quartet you so carefully selected, they will serve as the perfect backdrop for my corporate event. I am repurposing your little dream wedding to secure my future. He looks around the room, expecting applause for his ruthless business acumen. My mother nods in vigorous agreement, thoroughly impressed by his sheer audacity. That is a brilliant move, Julian. Yvonne praises him completely. Ignoring the fact that he is stealing the wedding event I spent an entire year planning and funding. Then she turns her cold, calculating eyes back to me. Kiara, since Julian is terminating the relationship, you need to leave the keys to the downtown condo. Julian paid the security deposit. Pack your cheap bags tonight and get out. Do not embarrass this family any further. We are staying to finish the dessert course. The sheer audacity of her demand hangs heavily in the air. She wants me to hand over my home walk out into the night with nothing and let them eat cake while my life supposedly falls apart. They want me broken. They want me destitute. They want me crawling back to them begging for a scrap of their conditional love. I reach into my clutch one final time. I pull out the heavy brass keys to the luxury downtown condo. I hold them up by the ring, letting them catch the light of the sparkling chandeliers above us. Julian holds out his hand, a smug, victorious grin plastered across his handsome face. I do not hand them to him. Instead, I open my fingers and let the keys drop directly into his half-full glass of vintage champagne. The liquid splashes up, staining the immaculate cuff of his expensive custom shirt. Enjoy the condo, Julian, I say, my voice ringing with absolute terrifying authority. The lease expires at exactly midnight tonight, and you might have a hard time renewing it considering my firm owns the entire building. Julian's smile vanishes instantly. His hand hovers awkwardly over the ruined champagne glass. Chantel's mouth drops open in horror. Preston stops swirling his bourbon, his pale face draining of color. My mother stares at me, her aristocratic mask finally slipping to reveal pure, unadulterated shock. I do not wait for their pathetic responses. I turn on my heel, the heavy silk of my designer dress sweeping gracefully across the polished marble floor. I walk away from the head table, away from the loud gasps of the country club guests, and away from the family that has spent 35 years trying to convince me I was worthless. I walk out with my head held high, my spine straight, and my dignity completely intact. The heavy oak doors of the ballroom close behind me, muting the chaotic whispers of the crowd inside. The cool evening air hits my face as I step out onto the grand portico toward the valet stand. My heart is racing, pumping pure adrenaline through my veins. I have just detonated a bomb in the middle of my own life, and the fallout is going to be spectacular. As I hand my ticket to the valet, a sharp vibration against my palm makes me look down. My phone screen lights up with a new text message. It is a private encrypted number, but I know exactly who it belongs to. I stare at the glowing screen in the dim light of the country club entrance. The message is short, precise, and carries the weight of a billion-dollar empire behind it. I heard what he did, the text reads. Do not leave yet. I am sending my car. It is Sterling, Julian's billionaire boss, the notoriously ruthless CEO of Zenith Capital, the man Julian is currently hijacking my wedding venue to impress tomorrow night, and the man who holds the actual key to my complete and total revenge. A slow, dangerous smile spreads across my face. Julian thought he was making a smart corporate play by cutting me loose. He thought I was a liability. He has absolutely no idea that I am about to become his absolute worst nightmare. The heavy metallic clink of my solid black titanium card hitting the mahogany table echoed through the grand ballroom like a gunshot. The silence that instantly blanketed the room was absolute and suffocating. 50 of our closest friends, family members, and corporate guests froze. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The string quartet in the corner had completely stopped playing their bows, hovering awkwardly over their instruments. All eyes were locked on that small, sleek piece of metal, sitting squarely on top of the $150,000 itemized invoice. Julian stared at it, his perfectly practiced smirk faltering for a fraction of a second. A bead of sweat formed at his temple, catching the light of the crystal chandeliers overhead. For a moment, the handsome, arrogant executive looked exactly like the terrified, incompetent fraud I had spent the last 3 years secretly carrying. Next to him, Chantel stopped breathing. Her eyes widened, scanning the card, trying to comprehend how the sister she had spent a lifetime treating like a broke charity case could casually drop a limitless piece of titanium onto a 6-figure bill. Preston, her white husband, who spent every family dinner loudly boasting about his trust fund and his Nantucket lineage, suddenly looked as though he had swallowed a lemon. The smug laughter died in his throat. Julian recovered quickly, swallowing hard and aggressively adjusting his silk tie. He let out a harsh, patronizing laugh, shaking his head as if I had just told a pathetic joke. A prop card, Kiara, he said, his voice dripping with condescension as he picked up the microphone again. You really brought a fake metal card to a country club to save face. This is exactly the kind of ghetto theatrical behavior I am talking about. This is why you will never belong in my world. He leaned forward, resting his hands on the table, trying to assert his physical dominance over the space. But you do not need to worry about the venue fee right now. I am not actually canceling this booking. I am taking it over. I kept my face entirely impassive, refusing to give him a single ounce of the reaction he so desperately craved. You see, Julian continued projecting his voice so the Zenith Capital executives at the back tables could hear him clearly. Tomorrow night was supposed to be a wedding, but I have decided to repurpose this entire setup. My CEO Sterling is flying in from London tomorrow morning. I need to lock in this vice president promotion by the end of the quarter. Hosting an elite high-level corporate retreat for him and the executive board is exactly how I am going to do it. Julian waved his hand dismissively toward the breathtaking displays of imported white orchids cascading down the walls, the custom lighting design, and the menus detailing the 5-course truffle dinner I had spent months curating. Your one useful trait was event planning, Kiara Julian sneered. The aesthetics here are actually decent enough for a corporate backdrop. So consider this your final contribution to my career. I am keeping the venue, I am keeping the catering, and I am hosting Zenith Capital right here. You can consider the invoice a convenience fee for my trouble. The sheer audacity of his entitlement was breathtaking. He was stealing the wedding I had paid for with my own blood, sweat, and tears, and he was packaging it as a corporate power play to impress a billionaire boss who barely knew his name. Before I could even open my mouth to dismantle his delusion, my mother decided to deliver her final blow. Yvonne stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the polished hardwood floor. She smoothed the front of her tailored designer dress, a dress I had bought for her, and pointed a manicured finger directly at the exit. She looked at me not as a daughter, but as a stain on her perfect, carefully curated evening. Julian is being more than generous by letting you leave with your dignity intact, Yvonne announced, her voice echoing with a chilling, aristocratic coldness. Leave the keys to the downtown condo right now, Kiara. We all know Julian paid the security deposit on that place. Pack your cheap bags tonight and get out before he calls building security. Do not embarrass this family any further. We are staying to finish the dessert course. I looked at the woman who gave birth to me. I looked at the deep lines of bitterness around her mouth, the desperate need for validation shining in her eyes. For 35 years, I had bent over backward trying to earn her love. I had overlooked her draining my college fund for Chantel. I had forgiven her constant biting critiques about my hair, my ambition, and my tone. I had allowed her to treat me like the family scapegoat simply because I was independent. But looking at her now, siding with a man who had just publicly humiliated me, demanding I surrender my own home to protect his ego, the last remaining thread of my childhood loyalty snapped. I did not feel heartbreak. I felt an overwhelming euphoric sense of liberation. I looked down at Julian. He was holding his hand out across the table, his palm open, expecting me to obediently hand over my keys and walk away in absolute defeat. He wanted the visual victory of me submitting to him in front of his colleagues. I calmly reached into my satin clutch. I pulled out the heavy brass keys attached to a thick leather ring. I held them up, letting them dangle in the air. Julian smiled, his eyes gleaming with triumphant malice. I moved my hand smoothly over the table until the keys were positioned directly above his half-full glass of vintage champagne. I looked him dead in the eyes, my expression utterly void of emotion. I opened my fingers. The heavy brass keys plummeted downward, dropping directly into his champagne glass. The liquid exploded upward in a violent splash, dousing the front of Julian's immaculate bespoke suit jacket and staining his crisp white shirt. Julian gasped, jumping back from the table as the cold champagne soaked through to his skin. "Enjoy the condo, Julian," I said, my voice dangerously soft, but carrying a lethal authority that made the entire room hold its breath. "The lease expires at exactly midnight tonight, and you might have a very hard time renewing it, considering my firm owns the holding company that owns the entire building." The color instantly drained from Julian's face. His mouth fell open, his eyes darting frantically from the ruined champagne glass to my face, searching for a punchline that was never going to come. Chantel let out a sharp, genuine gasp of horror, covering her mouth with both hands. Preston stumbled backward slightly, knocking his knee against the table leg. Yvonne stood entirely paralyzed, her pointing finger slowly dropping to her side as the reality of my words began to penetrate her thick skull. They thought I was a struggling freelancer. They thought I was a liability. They had absolutely no idea that I was the quiet, untouchable force funding the very ground they walked on. I did not wait for them to recover. I turned on my heel, the heavy silk of my gown sweeping gracefully across the marble floor. I walked away from the head table, away from the wide-eyed guests, and away from the toxic, suffocating prison my family had kept me in for my entire life. I walked out of the ballroom with my head held high, my spine straight, and my heels clicking rhythmically against the stone. I pushed through the heavy double doors of the country club, leaving the dead silence of the venue behind me. The cool evening air hit my face as I stepped out onto the grand portico. The world outside felt incredibly still, incredibly expansive. I took a deep, steadying breath, feeling the adrenaline sing through my veins. I walked toward the valet stand, reaching into my clutch to retrieve my parking ticket. Just as I pulled the paper stub from my bag, my phone vibrated violently against my palm. I stopped walking. I pulled the device out and looked at the illuminated screen. It was a text message from a highly encrypted private number, a number I knew by heart, a number that belonged to a man who controlled global markets with a single signature. I stared at the screen in the dim amber glow of the portico lights. The message read, "I heard what he just did. Do not leave yet." It was Sterling, Julian's billionaire boss, the man who was supposedly flying in tomorrow morning, the man Julian was trying to impress by stealing my venue. A slow, razor-sharp smile spread across my face. Julian thought he was making a ruthless corporate play. He had no idea he was already standing in the ashes of his own career. The sleek black Maybach idles at the curb. Sterling's personal driver opens the heavy door for me, his expression entirely neutral. I slide into the pristine leather interior, the quiet hum of the engine providing a stark, immediate contrast to the chaotic humiliation I just left behind in the country club ballroom. I do not direct the driver to a cheap hotel, nor do I head toward the leased downtown condo Julian thinks I am currently crying over. Instead, the luxury car glides smoothly toward the financial district, bypassing the residential areas my family deems acceptable. We pull into the private, heavily guarded subterranean garage of the Obsidian Tower. This is my actual primary residence. It is a sprawling, ultra-luxury penthouse, occupying the entire top floor of the city's most exclusive skyscraper. My family knows absolutely nothing about this place. My mother and sister firmly believe my boutique crisis management firm barely generates enough revenue to cover basic overhead. They have no idea that the private elevator requires a retinal scan before ascending, or that the doors open directly into a magnificent foyer, with floor-to-ceiling glass walls overlooking the glittering panoramic city skyline. The space is a fortress of imported black marble, rich velvet furnishings, and curated contemporary African-American art. It is the physical manifestation of the immense generational wealth I built entirely with my own two hands, far away from their toxic conditional approval. Sterling is already waiting for me in my private lounge. He stands by the expansive glass wall holding a crystal tumbler of scotch silhouetted against the city lights. Sterling is a formidable, commanding presence. He is a self-made billionaire, his dark skin contrasting sharply with the crisp, immaculate lines of his tailored navy suit. He radiates the kind of quiet, lethal power that dominates corporate boardrooms without him ever having to raise his voice or demand attention. We do not have a typical dynamic between a boss and a vendor. Our dialogue is razor-sharp, completely stripped of any polite corporate formalities. He turns to face me as I enter, his intelligent gaze sweeping over my ruined evening gown, taking in the posture I refuse to let drop. He does not offer me pity. Pity is for the weak, and Sterling knows exactly who I am and what I am capable of. I am not just an external public relations agent hired to clean up corporate messes. I am the silent, majority partner in Zenith Capital's private equity crisis management division. Sterling and I built the aggressive architecture of his company's expansion together. While the industry credits him with ruthless efficiency, I am the one who owns the shadows of his empire. He sets his glass down with a sharp clink against the marble bar. Tell me you finally cut the dead weight loose, Sterling says, his voice a low, resonant baritone that immediately commands the room. I pour myself a glass of premium bourbon, the amber liquid burning a welcome, steadying trail down my throat. Julian delivered a $150,000 invoice and fired me as his future wife in front of my entire family. I reply, keeping my tone completely clinical and devoid of tears. He claimed I am a public relations liability. He stated that his imminent promotion to vice president requires a woman with a refined pedigree, not a street hustler running a glorified hobby. Sterling lets out a harsh, completely humorless laugh. He shakes his head, walking toward the leather sofa. Julian actually believes he earned that vice president nomination on his own merit. He is a walking suit, Kiara. An empty, incompetent vessel who could not negotiate his way out of a paper bag. Through our rapid-fire exchange, the absolute reality of Julian's entire corporate existence is laid bare. Julian is a complete fraud. Every brilliant pitch, every multi-million-dollar acquisition strategy, and every flawless crisis response that Julian ever submitted to the Zenith Executive Board was completely ghost-written by me. Julian possesses a staggering lack of business acumen. I spent the last 3 years tirelessly propping him up behind the scenes. I fed him the exact words to say during high-stakes negotiations. I designed his complex financial presentations late into the night while he slept. I systematically shielded his catastrophic incompetence from the industry because I loved him and I desperately wanted to see him succeed. I handed Julian the architectural blueprint to an empire, and he used it to convince himself he was a self-made king. He genuinely thinks he outgrew me. I say, the bitter irony settling heavily in my chest. He stood in front of my mother and my sister and proudly claimed my background was too rough for his elite trajectory. My family cheered for him. They celebrated my humiliation because it validated their own twisted narrative about my worth. Sterling closes the distance between us, his movements deliberate and unhurried. The air in the room suddenly feels charged thick with an intense, unspoken chemistry that we have strictly and professionally ignored for years. He stops just inches from me. His physical presence is overwhelming, his dark eyes locking entirely onto mine, stripping away any remaining pretense. I never cared about Julian, Sterling confesses, his voice dropping to a dangerous, intimate register. I knew he was a complete fraud from day one. I saw right through his mediocre spreadsheets and his recycled corporate buzzwords. I knew exactly who was pulling the strings. I only kept Julian on the Zenith payroll for one reason, Kiara. It kept you in my orbit. I stare at him, my heart accelerating as his words rewrite the entire history of our professional relationship. I needed your brilliance for my firm. Sterling continues, stepping even closer. But more than that, I was waiting. I was waiting for the inevitable day Julian would finally show his true colors and prove he was utterly unworthy of your fierce loyalty. I despise his incompetence, and I despise the toxic elitism your family feeds on. You have spent years building empires for people who refuse to acknowledge your crown. He reaches out his fingers, lightly tracing the line of my jaw. The brief contact sends a sudden electric jolt straight through my veins, awakening a desire I had buried deep beneath my professional armor. I need a trusted partner to legally co-sign a massive international merger by Monday morning. Sterling says, his gaze burning with a calculated, ruthless intent. And I want a life partner who matches my exact drive. Julian thinks he is taking over your wedding venue to host an elite corporate retreat to impress me tomorrow night. He thinks he is going to stand at your altar and use your money to secure his vice president title. Let us give him exactly what he wants. Let us show up, get married, and give him the exact corporate execution he deserves. The proposition hangs in the air, heavy with the promise of absolute destruction and unimaginable power. He is not just asking me to ruin my ex-fiancé, he is offering me a partnership that will burn my family's fake empire to the ground and establish a completely new reign. I look into Sterling's eyes, seeing my own relentless ambition reflected perfectly back at me. I agree to the arrangement. I do not just want a wedding ring. I want to utterly dismantle the fake legacy Julian Preston and my mother have built on my back. We have exactly 24 hours to hijack the event, and I intend to make every single second count. Sterling does not flinch at my demand. Instead, the predatory smile on his face deepens, his dark eyes locking onto mine with a terrifying, absolute approval. He pours a second measure of premium scotch into his crystal tumbler and slides it across the black marble bar toward me. We are no longer a CEO and a shadow consultant. We are two apex predators mapping out our hunting grounds. I need a legally bound partner by Monday morning, Sterling says, his voice carrying the low, resonant hum of inevitable victory. Zenith Capital is finalizing a $3 billion merger with a highly conservative old money syndicate in London. They are looking for stability. They view a bachelor CEO as a volatile liability, but a married CEO anchored by a brilliant, ruthless wife who holds the silent majority in our crisis management division is an impenetrable fortress. I do not just want a marriage of convenience on paper, Kiara. I want a life partner who matches my exact drive. I want the woman who ghost wrote every single brilliant pitch Julian ever submitted to my desk. I take a slow sip of the scotch, letting the rich amber liquid burn a path of pure clarity down my throat. Julian thinks he is using your wedding venue to impress me tomorrow night. Sterling continues, stepping dangerously close. He is setting up a corporate stage to prove his worth. Let us show up. Take the stage, get married, and give him the exact corporate execution he deserves in front of the entire executive board. I look at the glittering skyline beyond the floor-to-ceiling glass walls of my penthouse. For my entire life, I have operated behind the curtain. I have quietly absorbed the insults, the financial abuse, and the suffocating condescension of my family while building an invisible empire. Stepping into the light as Sterling's wife and equal partner means burning the curtain entirely. I accept your proposal, I say, my voice ringing with absolute certainty. But I am not just going to destroy Julian's career. If I am doing this, I am severing every single parasite attached to my name. I want to completely dismantle the fake empires Julian Preston and my mother have built on my back. Name your terms, Sterling replies, crossing his arms and leaning against the marble counter. Julian gets nothing less than professional annihilation, I state, setting my glass down. He does not just get fired. I want him blacklisted from every major financial institution on the East Coast. He has been taking credit for my intellectual property for 3 years, and I want it publicly reclaimed. Consider it done, Sterling agrees instantly. I have a comprehensive, heavily encrypted file detailing Julian's unauthorized corporate expenses. He has been charging lavish dinners, luxury car rentals, and weekend getaways with his so-called clients to the Zenith accounts. It borders on embezzlement. I was saving it for a rainy day. Tomorrow night, we let it pour. And then there is Preston. I continue the memory of my brother-in-law's sneering face fueling my absolute resolve. He plays the role of a wealthy real estate magnate, but his brokerage firm is drowning in debt. 6 months ago, his primary commercial lender was preparing to force him into bankruptcy. I used a shell corporation to quietly buy out his debt, hoping to protect my sister from financial ruin. I own his firm. Tomorrow night I am calling in the loan. I want Preston liquidated. Sterling laughs, a rich, dark sound that fills the luxury lounge. You are absolutely terrifying, Kiara. I love it. And your mother? Yvonne is the architect of this entire nightmare, I say, my tone dropping to a cold, clinical whisper. She drained my college fund to pay for Chantel's destination wedding, and she has spent the last decade lecturing me about proper society. What she does not know is that the sprawling estate she currently lives in, the one my late father left behind with a massive unpaid second mortgage, is solely owned by me. I paid off the bank 5 years ago. I hold the deed. She has been living rent-free on the grace of the daughter she just tried to throw onto the street. I want the eviction papers drafted and served directly to her table at the reception. Sterling reaches out his large, warm hand, closing firmly over mine. We have exactly 24 hours to turn Julian's hijacked corporate retreat into a flawless billionaire tier wedding and a public execution. Let us get to work. The countdown begins. The midnight hours vanish into a relentless blur of high-stakes logistics and absolute precision. My penthouse transforms into a war room. Sterling makes a single authoritative phone call to his chief legal counsel. Within an hour, a team of high-powered attorneys arrives in my living room, carrying heavy leather briefcases. They draft a bulletproof marriage license and an ironclad prenuptial agreement that legally cements my position as an equal partner in Zenith Capital's holdings. I sign my name, securing my future and locking in the London merger. Next, I handle the venue. I pick up my phone and call the general manager of the Oak Grove Country Club. The man answers with a trembling voice, clearly panicked by a call at 2 in the morning. I bypass Julian entirely. I reveal my true identity as the primary shareholder of the hospitality group that owns the country club land. I issue strict, non-negotiable orders. The general manager is to let Julian believe he is completely in control. Julian will direct the catering, arrange the seating for the Zenith executives, and proudly stand at the front of the room. But at exactly 7 o'clock in the evening, the venue will execute my hidden directives. The lighting will shift, the music will change to my exact specifications, and the corporate retreat will revert back to a wedding ceremony. While I command the venue staff, Sterling coordinates the aesthetics. He wakes up his personal elite styling team in New York. A private helicopter is chartered to bring a selection of bridal gowns directly to my penthouse. I refuse to wear the dress Julian tainted with his cancellation. By 4 in the morning, a team of master tailors is fitting me into a breathtaking custom-made ivory silk gown covered in hand-stitched Swarovski crystals. It is a dress fit for the wife of a billionaire, radiating power, grace, and absolute dominance. We work side by side until the sky outside the glass walls begins to turn a pale, bruised purple. The chemistry between Sterling and me is palpable, shifting from professional respect to a deep, undeniable partnership. We are moving in perfect synchronization, setting the traps, arming the explosives, and preparing to watch the people who doubted us walk blindly into the blast zone. We do not sleep. We drink black coffee and review the printed dossiers containing Julian's financial crimes, Preston's debt acquisition papers, and Yvonne's eviction notice. Every single document is placed into sleek black leather folders bearing the Zenith Capital crest. We are going to serve them their destruction on a silver platter. Morning finally breaks. The golden light of the sun spills over the city skyline, illuminating the penthouse in a warm, victorious glow. I stand by the window wearing a plush silk robe, looking out at the empire I have quietly conquered. I feel an overwhelming sense of peace. The anxiety and the heartbreak of yesterday are completely gone, replaced by a cold, magnificent strength. Suddenly, the sharp chime of a notification breaks the quiet morning atmosphere. I walk over to the kitchen island and pick up my phone. The screen lights up with a new text message. It is from Julian. I unlock the device and read the words he has foolishly decided to send me. He is awake, energized, and clearly feeling untouchable. I hope you are enjoying whatever cheap motel you ended up in. Julian writes his text dripping with the same arrogant condescension he displayed at the rehearsal dinner. My corporate retreat is fully set up. Sterling lands in 3 hours. Do yourself a favor and stay far away from Oak Grove tonight. You have already embarrassed yourself enough. Do not try to beg for your venue back. You lost. I stare at the glowing screen. A genuine, chilling laugh escapes my lips. Julian is sitting in the dark, entirely unaware of the hellfire currently speeding toward his exact location. He thinks he has won the game, but he has not even realized the board has been completely flipped. I do not reply. I simply lock the screen, set the phone face down on the marble counter, and turn back to Sterling. It is time to get dressed, I say, my voice steady and resolute. We have a wedding to attend. I turn my back on the phone, refusing to let Julian's pathetic taunts disrupt the absolute clarity of my morning. The sprawling, ultra-luxury penthouse is already buzzing with quiet, relentless activity. Sterling's styling team swarms around me, their hands moving with practiced silent efficiency. They adjust the heavy ivory silk of my custom bridal gown, pinning, tucking, and smoothing until the silhouette is nothing short of flawless. The dress is a masterpiece of architectural design, radiating the exact kind of power, grace, and absolute dominance required for the execution we are about to pull off tonight. My phone screen lights up again on the marble counter. And again, Julian is practically begging for my attention. Since I am entirely focused on the floor-to-ceiling mirror, Sterling casually picks up the device. He unlocks it, bypassing my security with a code I gave him an hour ago, and reads the incoming messages aloud. His deep, resonant voice is laced with utter contempt for the man who used to work under him. Julian is sending photographs now. Pictures of the grand ballroom at the Oak Grove Country Club. I see the massive, breathtaking arches of imported white orchids I personally sourced from a private grower in Thailand. I see the crystal table settings, the bespoke linens, and the custom embossed menus detailing the exact 5-course meal I curated. Julian's text follows the images dripping with unearned arrogance. Sterling's executive team is going to be completely blown away by my aesthetic choices tonight, Julian writes. Thanks for funding my promotion, Kiara. The board will finally see me as the visionary leader this company needs. Be a good girl and stay out of sight today. Do not try to show up and beg for your venue back. You lost. Sterling lets out a dark, humorless laugh, tossing the phone back onto the counter. He actually believes he has a visionary mind, Sterling says, shaking his head. He is standing in the middle of a masterpiece you built, claiming he painted it. Right on cue, a voicemail notification chimes through the room. It is my mother. Sterling taps the screen to play it on speakerphone, the audio echoing clearly across the vast sunlit space. Kiara, it is... Your mother, Yvonne's voice crackles, dripping with her usual aristocratic disdain. Since you are no longer walking down the aisle, and since Julian has graciously allowed you to leave with your dignity, I expect you to return your grandmother's diamond heirloom earrings immediately. You clearly have no use for them now. They belong to a successful married daughter. I am giving them to Chantel. Drop them off at the country club security desk by noon. Do not make me ask twice. The sheer audacity of her demand hangs heavily in the air, cold and suffocating. Those vintage diamond earrings were the only thing my grandmother explicitly left to me. She was the only person in this family who ever acknowledged my relentless work ethic, silently pressing the velvet box into my hands before she passed away. Now Yvonne wants to strip me of my last shred of family legacy and hand it over to her golden child. She thinks, because I lost Julian, I have lost my right to exist in their circle. She thinks Chantel deserves the family diamonds simply because Chantel managed to keep her fraudulent, mediocre husband. Sterling looks at me through the mirror, his jaw clenched tight, waiting for my reaction. He expects outrage. He expects me to shatter a glass, to scream, to finally break down under the weight of my family's relentless cruelty. But I do neither. I remain perfectly terrifyingly still as the makeup artist applies a bold, deep crimson to my lips. I do not engage. I do not type out a furious defensive reply to Julian. I do not call my mother back to scream about my right to my own inheritance. For 35 years, my family has desperately tried to push me into the stereotype of the angry, unstable, and overly emotional scapegoat. They want me to react so they can point their manicured fingers and validate their narrative about my lack of grace. They need me to be hysterical so they can feel superior. But I do not operate on emotion anymore. I operate on pure, unadulterated strategy. Emotional reactions are for amateurs. Let them feel victorious. Let them enjoy their morning mimosas and their false sense of security. The higher they climb on their fragile pedestals of delusion, the harder they are going to hit the concrete tonight. I step away from the vanity, the heavy silk of my train gliding soundlessly across the polished hardwood floor. I pick up my encrypted work phone, a device completely separate from the one Julian is currently blowing up. I dial a secure line that bypasses all corporate reception desks. It goes straight to Tasha. Tasha is my best friend, my ride or die, and the lead corporate investigator at my crisis management firm. She is a woman who can unearth a CEO's buried offshore accounts before her morning coffee gets cold. She is ruthless, brilliant, and fiercely loyal to me. Tell me you are not currently crying into a pint of ice cream over that worthless suit, Tasha answers on the first ring, her voice sharp and fiercely protective. I am currently standing in a $50 million penthouse wearing a custom bridal gown, and I'm about to marry Sterling, I reply smoothly, my voice echoing with icy calm. There is a beat of absolute stunned silence on the line. Then Tasha lets out a loud, triumphant laugh that fills the room. I always knew you were a mastermind, Kiara. You never just burn a bridge, you detonate the entire city. Give me the targets. I need a deep, invasive, completely merciless financial background check on Preston, I instruct her, pacing slowly in front of the glass windows. Look into his so-called old money real estate firm. Dig into his commercial lenders, his property assets, his shell companies, and his personal credit lines. I already secretly own the debt on his primary brokerage, but I want to know exactly how deep his rot goes. I want every fraudulent appraisal, every missed mortgage payment, and every lie he has ever told Yvonne to secure her financial backing. I want him entirely publicly exposed. Consider his fake legacy dismantled. Tasha says, the rapid clacking of her mechanical keyboard already audible in the background. What else? I turn and meet Sterling's dark, approving gaze across the room. He hands me his sleek black tablet, which displays the raw, unedited data of Julian's corporate embezzlement at Zenith Capital. Cross-reference. Preston's real estate transactions with Julian's Zenith Capital expense reports over the last 24 months. I command, my voice dropping to a lethal register. Look for any overlapping wire transfers, ghost consulting fees, or suspicious vendor payments. Julian is way too stupid to run a massive embezzlement scheme entirely on his own without leaving a glaring paper trail. And Preston is exactly the kind of desperate, fake wealthy parasite who would help him launder corporate funds through dummy real estate properties just to maintain his country club membership. It makes perfect sense. Julian had access to millions in corporate capital, but he needed a way to clean the money to fund his extravagant lifestyle. Preston had the fake real estate brokerage and a desperate need for cash to keep Chantel draped in designer labels. They were a match made in fraudulent heaven. Give me 60 minutes, Tasha says, her tone shifting from playful to deadly serious. I'm going to gut them both. The connection cuts out, leaving the penthouse in a state of high-stakes anticipation. Sterling walks over to me holding out a delicate velvet box. Inside rests a breathtaking diamond necklace, the stones catching the morning light and throwing brilliant prisms across the walls. He fastens it around my neck, his hands warm and steady against my skin. We stand side by side, looking out over the city. We review the final logistics for the evening. The Oak Grove Country Club staff are fully briefed and entirely loyal to my holding company. At precisely 7 o'clock, the trap will spring. The Zenith Capital Executive Board, including the conservative international partners Sterling is courting for the massive merger, will arrive expecting a dry, arrogant presentation from Julian. Instead, they will be greeted by their billionaire CEO and his new equal partner. We wait in the quiet luxury of the penthouse, the silence only broken by the ticking of the grandfather clock. The anticipation is a living, breathing entity in the room. I am entirely focused, my mind running through every possible variable, every countermeasure, and every devastating piece of evidence we are about to drop on the table. Less than an hour later, my encrypted phone rings. The caller ID flashes Tasha's name. I answer immediately and put her on speakerphone so Sterling can hear the culmination of our strike. Kiara, Tasha says, her voice breathless with pure adrenaline and disbelief. You are not going to believe what Preston and Julian have been hiding. Tasha's voice echoes through the expansive penthouse living room, sharp, electric, and cutting straight through the quiet hum of the morning. I have the call on speakerphone, standing next to the black marble island, while Sterling leans against the counter, a cup of dark coffee in his hand. We both listen in absolute silence as my lead corporate investigator systematically dismantles my family's entire fake reality. Preston is completely broke, Tasha announces, the rapid, aggressive sound of her mechanical keyboard clacking furiously in the background. His old money Nantucket lineage is a complete fabrication. His grandfather was not a shipping magnate. He was a plumber in New Jersey. But his fake pedigree is just the appetizer, Kiara. His luxury real estate firm has not closed a single legitimate commercial deal in 14 months. He is running a massive shell game. He is actively embezzling from his clients' escrow accounts to fund Chantel's lavish lifestyle. The brand new Tesla, the designer handbags, the luxury destination vacations, it is all paid for with stolen money. He is operating a localized Ponzi scheme, moving funds from new clients to pay off the old ones. I look over at Sterling. A dark, predatory smile tugs at the corner of his mouth. My perfect sister, the undisputed golden child who spent her entire life mocking my relentless work ethic, is entirely funded by federal crimes. Chantel's entire identity is a house of cards waiting for a single gust of wind. It gets infinitely better. Tasha continues, her voice dropping into a deadly serious, lethal register. You told me to cross-reference Preston's accounts with Julian's Zenith Capital expense reports over the last 24 months. I dug into the offshore wire transfers. Julian is not just expensing luxury dinners in five-star hotel suites to the firm. He has a massive underground gambling problem. He owes millions to private syndicates. He has been using Preston's failing real estate firm as a dummy corporation to launder Zenith Capital funds. Julian authorizes fake exorbitant consulting fees from Zenith, sends the corporate money to Preston's failing brokerage, and Preston wires it directly to Julian's bookies in Macau, taking a percentage off the top for his trouble. Sterling exhales sharply. The atmosphere in the luxury penthouse turns instantly frigid. The air grows heavy with the distinct, terrifying pressure of a billionaire whose empire has just been breached. Stealing from Zenith Capital is an unforgivable offense. Julian has not just burned his career, he has signed his own corporate death warrant. Print every single ledger, Tasha, I command, my voice ringing with absolute unflinching authority. I want the IP addresses, the bank statements, the forged invoices, and the offshore routing numbers perfectly documented. Bind them in Zenith Capital presentation folders. We are delivering them tonight. Already printing. Tasha replies, the sound of a high-speed laser printer whirring to life in her office. I will have the physical files couriered directly to your penthouse security desk within the hour. Happy hunting, Kiara. I disconnect the call and set the encrypted phone down on the marble. Sterling walks over, setting his coffee mug aside. His dark eyes gleam with unfiltered, ruthless admiration. He looks at me not as a subordinate, but as a general evaluating a fellow commander before an inevitable slaughter. Your ex-fiancé is a thief, Sterling says smoothly, straightening the cuffs of his shirt. And your brother-in-law is his willing accomplice. They handed us the exact ammunition we need to legally and professionally bury them both. They thought they were the smartest men in the room. I reply, turning to face the panoramic view of the city skyline. They forgot who actually built the room. With the financial execution fully prepared, I move immediately to secure the physical battlefield. Julian genuinely thinks he hijacked my wedding venue. He is currently walking around the Oak Grove Country Club, believing he is in total control, dictating orders to the catering staff and arranging the seating chart to impress his boss. He has absolutely no idea who actually holds the leash. I pull up a private contact in my phone and press dial. Richard Oakmont, the billionaire owner of the Oak Grove Country Club, answers on the second ring. 2 years ago, Richard was caught in a highly publicized, catastrophic financial scandal that threatened to tear down his entire hospitality empire and send him to federal prison. My crisis management firm stepped in. I personally orchestrated the media blackout, restructured his board of directors, handled the federal auditors, and saved his legacy from total public ruin. He owes me his reputation, his freedom, and his fortune. Kiara, Richard says, his voice thick with immediate, unquestioning respect. Tell me exactly what you need. I need absolute, undisputed control of your flagship property tonight, I state, skipping the pleasantries entirely. Julian believes he is hosting a corporate retreat in the grand ballroom. I want him to maintain that grand delusion until exactly 7 o'clock this evening. Until then, you will instruct your entire staff to comply with his arrogant demands. Let him feel like a king. Let him set the stage. And at 7 o'clock, Richard asks, his tone shifting into pure tactical business. At 7 o'clock, the management abruptly changes. I instruct pacing slowly across the imported hardwood floor. I am taking over the venue's private security detail, the lighting grid, and the master audio-visual room. When I walk through those heavy double doors, I want the ballroom locked down. Nobody leaves without my explicit permission. No press, no unauthorized guests, and absolutely no interference from your floor managers. I want Julian trapped inside the very cage he thought he built for me. Consider it done, Richard agrees instantly without a single moment of hesitation. I will personally hand over the master override codes to your private security team. The ballroom is yours, Kiara. Burn it down to the foundation if you have to. I end the call and toss the phone onto the sofa. The perimeter is fully secured. The trap is perfectly constructed, the exits are sealed, and the audience is completely unaware. There is only one thing left to do. I walk out of the lounge and head directly into the master suite. The time for corporate strategy is over. It is time to prepare for war. Hanging in the center of the massive illuminated walk-in closet is the dress. It is a custom-made $20,000 silk bridal gown. It is a masterpiece of architectural design featuring a plunging neckline, intricate hand-stitched French lace, and a sweeping dramatic train that commands the physical space of any room it enters. When I first ordered this dress 6 months ago, I made the terrible mistake of showing the design sketches to my family. Yvonne took one look at the exorbitant price tag and laughed directly in my face. She stood in my cramped original studio apartment and swore I could never afford such a garment on a struggling freelancer's budget. She accused me of trying to outshine Chantel's tacky destination wedding. Later that same week, Julian found the preliminary invoice. He sneered, claiming the dress was too extravagant, too loud, and entirely inappropriate for a woman who was supposed to be a quiet, supportive corporate wife. He demanded I return it and buy something cheap off the rack. I did not return it. I kept it hidden safely, stored in the climate-controlled wing of this penthouse, waiting for the exact day I would finally wear it. Tonight is that day. I drop my silk robe and step into the gown. The heavy silk glides over my skin, fitting my body with absolute flawless precision. I pull the hidden zipper up the back, feeling the fabric cinch tight against my waist. This is not just a wedding dress. It is a $20,000 suit of titanium armor. I step into a pair of towering crystal-embellished heels. I apply a deep matte red lipstick that contrasts sharply with the pure ivory of the silk. Sterling leans against the doorframe of the closet, watching my transformation in quiet reverence. He is wearing a tailored midnight black tuxedo that radiates raw, undeniable billionaire power. His dark eyes trace the elegant lines of my gown, lingering on the sheer, dangerous confidence radiating from my posture. He does not see an extravagant, inappropriate woman. He sees a ruthless equal. He sees a queen ready to execute a hostile public takeover. "You look absolutely terrifying," Sterling says, his voice a low, gravelly hum of pure appreciation. "I am just getting started," I reply, grabbing my metallic clutch. We walk out of the penthouse side by side, a unified front of absolute destruction. The private elevator takes us down to the subterranean garage, where Sterling's personal driver is waiting beside the sleek armored Maybach. The heavy car door clicks open. I slide into the plush leatherback seat, carefully adjusting the massive train of my gown to fit the space. Sterling slides in right next to me, his presence a solid grounding force in the opulent cabin. Resting perfectly square on my lap are 3 thick black leather dossiers bearing the Zenith Capital crest. Inside those heavy folders are the damning bank statements, the illegal wire transfers, and the immediate eviction notices that will systematically destroy Julian Preston and my mother in front of the entire city. The engine roars to life, a deep predatory growl that echoes off the concrete walls of the underground garage. The trap is officially set. The safety on the weapon has been clicked off. We are heading straight into the lion's den, and we are bringing the slaughter right to their front door. Inside the grand ballroom of the Oak Grove Country Club, the atmosphere is thick with manufactured prestige and stolen glory. I watch the live feed from the venue's security cameras on a tablet in the back of the Maybach just moments before we step out. Julian stands near the exact center of the room, flanked by the towering architectural arrangements of imported white orchids that I personally sourced from a private grower in Thailand. He is holding a fresh flute of vintage champagne, laughing loudly at a joke made by one of Zenith Capital's senior board members. He is entirely in his element, wearing a freshly tailored charcoal suit to replace the one I ruined just 24 hours earlier. He is playing the role of the visionary executive to absolute perfection, projecting an aura of complete control, utterly oblivious to the fact that his entire stage is built on a foundation of gasoline, and I am holding the match. To his left, my mother Yvonne is holding court with a group of wealthy corporate wives. She is draped in a severe, structured sapphire evening gown, her posture rigid and dripping with a false sense of aristocratic superiority. She nods gracefully as she fabricates stories about our family's illustrious background, actively taking credit for the lavish catering and the breathtaking venue design. She is absorbing the compliments that rightfully belong to me, feeding her endless toxic hunger for validation. Chantel stands just a few feet away, clinging tightly to Preston's arm, her eyes scanning the room to ensure everyone is noticing her new designer dress. Preston is sweating slightly under the collar of his expensive but poorly fitted tweed jacket, loudly boasting to a group of Zenith risk analysts about his supposed commercial real estate conquests in Nantucket. They are all drinking my champagne, eating my imported truffles, and celebrating my absolute destruction. They are waiting for one man, Sterling. Julian keeps checking his heavy gold watch, his eyes darting toward the main entrance, desperate for his billionaire CEO to walk through those doors and cement his vice president promotion. At precisely 7 o'clock, the trap springs. The directives I issued to the venue owner are initiated with absolute merciless precision. The ambient, low-tempo corporate jazz that has been murmuring through the hidden speakers cuts out completely. The sudden dead silence causes an immediate ripple of confusion across the sprawling ballroom. Conversations halt mid-sentence. Zenith executives look up from their drinks, their brows furrowing. Julian's triumphant smile falters. He frowns, raising his hand to snap his fingers at a passing waiter, intending to demand an explanation. But the waiter deliberately ignores him, turning sharply and walking straight through the service doors. The lighting in the ballroom abruptly shifts. The bright, sterile corporate spotlights instantly dim, replaced by a warm, dramatic amber glow that highlights the floral arches and illuminates the grand center aisle. Julian's frown deepens into a scowl of pure, unchecked irritation. He sets his champagne glass on a passing tray and takes an aggressive step toward the audio-visual booth, clearly intending to berate a staff member for ruining his carefully orchestrated professional ambiance. Before Julian can take a second step, the heavy double oak doors at the back of the ballroom swing open with a resounding, echoing thud. The silence is instantly shattered by the powerful, unmistakable chords of the traditional wedding march blasting from the venue's massive, state-of-the-art sound system. The volume is commanding, filling every single corner of the vast space, vibrating through the floorboards. The entire room turns in unison. I step over the threshold, bathed entirely in the dramatic amber light. The custom ivory silk bridal gown flows around me like liquid armor, the hand-stitched Swarovski crystals catching the light and blinding the front row of guests. The plunging neckline and dramatic sweeping train command the physical space of the room. This is the exact $20,000 dress Yvonne swore I could never afford on a freelancer's budget. This is the exact dress Julian demanded I return, because it was too extravagant for a quiet, supportive corporate wife. I look nothing like the defeated, heartbroken woman they expected to slink away into the night. I look like absolute royalty. I look like a woman who owns the very ground they are standing on. And I am not walking alone. My hand rests firmly on the arm of Sterling. The billionaire CEO of Zenith Capital steps into the ballroom right beside me, matching my slow, deliberate, predatory pace. His midnight black tuxedo is immaculate, his expression completely unreadable. He radiates a dark, lethal authority that instantly commands the total submission of every corporate executive in the room. The Zenith board members immediately straighten their postures, their eyes widening in collective shock. as they recognize the man who signs their paychecks, holds their bonuses, and dictates their careers, but they are not the ones I am watching. I lock my eyes directly onto my family. The physical reactions rippling through them are a masterpiece of human panic. Chantel lets out a strangled, high-pitched gasp. Her perfectly manicured hand flies to her throat, her eyes bulging as they trace the intricate French lace of my gown, realizing instantly that she has been entirely eclipsed. Preston physically recoils. He stumbles backward, bumping hard into a tall cocktail table, his face draining of all color as he stares at the towering, untouchable presence of the actual billionaire he has spent the entire night pretending to have connections with. My mother looks as though the floor has just dropped out from beneath her feet. Yvonne's sapphire gown suddenly seems incredibly cheap. Her jaw drops completely, stripping away decades of carefully maintained aristocratic superiority. She stares at me, then at Sterling, her mind violently short-circuiting as it tries to process how the daughter she deemed an unrefined public relations liability is currently commanding the absolute center of gravity in a room full of millionaires. But Julian's reaction is the ultimate prize. He freezes completely. His entire body goes rigid, his eyes locked onto Sterling, his brain desperately trying to calculate why his notoriously reclusive, ruthless boss is walking down a wedding aisle with the woman he just publicly discarded. The terrifying reality of his situation hits him like a freight train. The fresh flute of champagne he just picked up slips straight through his trembling fingers. The crystal hits the polished marble floor, shattering into 100 glittering pieces. The sharp crash of the glass is completely swallowed by the swelling crescendo of the wedding march. We stop at the exact center of the ballroom, standing right in front of the shattered remnants of Julian's glass. The music abruptly fades out, leaving the room vibrating with an unbearable heavy tension. Julian's survival instinct finally kicks in, completely overriding whatever shred of common sense he has left. He rushes forward, his face flushed, a thick layer of sweat visibly forming on his forehead. He practically shoves two of his own board members out of the way to reach us. "Sterling, sir." Julian stammers his voice, a frantic, high-pitched plea for damage control. "What is this? Why are you with her? She's a liability." Julian's voice cracks under the immense pressure of his collapsing reality. He reaches out his sweaty palm, grazing the sleeve of Sterling's immaculate tuxedo. "Sterling, sir, what is this? Why are you with her? She's a liability." Sterling does not yell. He does not even raise his voice. He simply looks down at Julian's hand with an expression of such profound, glacial disgust that Julian instantly recoils, as if he has been burned. The billionaire CEO of Zenith Capital adjusts his cuff, his movements terrifyingly deliberate. "You will never speak to my wife in that tone again." Sterling says, his voice a low, lethal hum that carries effortlessly across the dead silent ballroom. The word wife drops like a live grenade. A collective gasp ripples through the crowd of Zenith executives and conservative London investors. Chantel physically stumbles backward, her stiletto catching on the marble, while my mother's face turns the color of wet ash. Julian's mouth opens and closes, but no sound comes out. His brain is completely incapable of processing the information. "Wife!" Julian finally chokes out, his eyes darting frantically between my diamond necklace and Sterling's unyielding stare. "Sir, there has to be some kind of mistake. Kiara is a caterer. She is a low-level consultant. She is not. She is the true architect of every single piece of value you have ever brought to my firm." Sterling interrupts, his tone slicing through Julian's pathetic defense with surgical precision. Sterling turns his attention away from the sweating, hyperventilating man in front of him and directly addresses the circle of elite executives who are watching the execution with rapt attention. "Gentlemen," Sterling announces, projecting his voice to the board members, "for the past 3 years, Julian has presented a series of highly aggressive, brilliant acquisition strategies to the Zenith board. The Nexus merger, the Global Ascendancy restructuring, the Vanguard crisis response. You all praised his visionary insight. You all believed he was a rising star in our industry." Sterling pauses, letting the weight of his words settle over the room. He looks back at Julian, his eyes completely devoid of mercy. He did not write a single word of those portfolios. Sterling states laying the absolute truth bare for the entire financial sector to see. Julian is a hollow vessel, a plagiarist, a complete fraud who has been entirely propped up by the brilliant strategic mind of the woman standing beside me. Kiara has been the silent majority partner in our crisis management division for years. She is my equal, she is my wife, and she is the only reason you were ever allowed to set foot inside Zenith Capital. Julian looks as though the oxygen has been completely vacuumed from the room. He tugs frantically at his silk tie, his chest heaving. The elite executives, the men Julian spent the last 2 hours desperately trying to impress, are now looking at him with naked, undisguised contempt. In the cutthroat world of high finance, incompetence is a sin, but being exposed as a talentless fraud is an absolute death sentence. Sterling reaches into the breast pocket of his tuxedo. He withdraws a crisp, heavy white envelope bearing the embossed Zenith Capital seal. He extends his hand, offering the envelope to the trembling man before him. "You are fired, Julian," Sterling says, his voice devoid of any emotion whatsoever. "Effective immediately. You are stripped of your title, your corporate access has already been revoked, and your security clearance was terminated the moment I walked through those doors." Julian stares at the envelope as if it is coated in poison. He refuses to take it. His hands shake violently at his sides. "You cannot do this," Julian whispers, his voice cracking into a pathetic, high-pitched whine. "You cannot fire me without severance. I have a contract. I have legal protections. That is my cue." I step forward, leaving Sterling's side. The heavy silk of my $20,000 gown rustles against the marble, the only sound in the suffocatingly quiet room. I walk directly toward the nearest crystal cocktail table. I do not look at Julian with anger. I look at him with the cold, clinical detachment of an exterminator dealing with a persistent pest. I lift the first heavy black leather dossier from my clutch. I hold it up for a fraction of a second, letting the zenith crest catch the amber lighting before I slam it down onto the crystal surface. The sharp, violent smack echoes through the ballroom like a gunshot. "You wanted a corporate retreat, Julian," I say, my voice ringing with absolute unflinching authority. "So let us review your corporate finances." Julian's eyes lock onto the black folder. All the remaining color drains from his face, leaving him looking sickly and hollow. "You do not have any legal protections, Julian, because employment contracts are immediately voided the second an executive engages in felony embezzlement." I state, projecting my voice so every single board member hears the exact nature of his crimes. "This dossier contains the fully documented, unedited records of your unauthorized corporate expenses over the last 24 months. You did not just steal my intellectual property to build your fake career. You stole directly from Zenith Capital to fund your degenerate lifestyle." I place my hand flat on the leather folder, leaning in slightly, forcing Julian to meet my gaze. "You are currently being audited for exactly $400,000. I announce, the number hanging in the air like a physical weight. $400,000 that you siphoned out of Zenith's expansion accounts to cover massive underground gambling debts. The room erupts into a low, horrified murmur. The conservative London investors, the men who prize financial stability above all else, are staring at Julian as if he is covered in a highly contagious disease. "That is a lie," Julian gasps, stumbling backward. "She is lying. She is a bitter, rejected woman trying to ruin me. I never touched corporate funds." "I have the offshore routing numbers," I reply smoothly, tapping the cover of the dossier. "I have the IP addresses you used to authorize the wire transfers from your Zenith laptop. I have the forged vendor invoices you submitted to accounting. You funneled the money out of Zenith and routed it through a localized failing commercial real estate firm to wash it clean before wiring it directly to your bookies in Macau." I slowly turn my head, my eyes cutting through the crowd until I lock directly onto Preston. My brother-in-law is standing completely frozen, looking like a deer caught in the headlights of an oncoming 18-wheeler. "We know exactly how you laundered the money, Julian," I say, keeping my eyes fixed entirely on Preston. "And we know exactly who helped you do it. Your accomplice is going to face his own execution shortly. But right now, we are dealing with you." Julian's knees literally give out. The arrogant, condescending man who stood in my mother's living room and proudly fired me as his future wife physically collapses. He hits the hard marble floor, the sharp impact ringing out as he drops to his knees right in front of the $20,000 dress he claimed I did not deserve. The illusion of his power, his fake wealth, and his borrowed brilliance is completely shattered, leaving behind nothing but a pathetic, desperate thief. He looks up at Sterling, tears actively spilling over his eyelashes, mixing with the sweat on his face. He clasps his hands together in a gesture of pure, unadulterated begging. "Please," Julian sobs, abandoning any remaining shred of his dignity. "Please, Sterling, I can explain everything. I was under so much pressure. I had a sickness. I will pay back every single cent. I will work for free. Just please do not press charges. Do not send me to prison. I will do anything." Sterling looks down at him, his face a mask of stone. "You do not negotiate with the executioner after the blade has already dropped," Sterling replies coldly. "My legal team is submitting this dossier to the federal authorities first thing Monday morning. You are going to face a grand jury, Julian. I highly suggest you spend your weekend finding a competent defense attorney." Julian lets out a pathetic broken wail, burying his face in his hands as the reality of his total professional and legal annihilation sets in. He is ruined. He has lost his job, his reputation, and very likely his freedom. The Zenith executives are already turning their backs on him, distancing themselves from the radioactive fallout of his crimes. I stand above him feeling absolutely nothing but cold clinical satisfaction. I do not pity him. I do not feel an ounce of regret. I simply step around his kneeling form, moving back to Sterling's side to prepare for the next target. But before I can even pull the second dossier from my clutch, the crowd parts. My mother, Yvonne, steps forward. Her face is a terrifying mask of rapid, frantic calculation. She has watched Julian be utterly dismantled. She has heard the words $400,000 and federal authorities. She knows a sinking ship when she sees one, and Yvonne has spent her entire life making sure her feet stay dry. She stops a few feet away from where Julian is sobbing on the marble floor. She looks down at him with an expression of pure, venomous disgust. Then, in a move of breathtaking opportunism, she physically steps over his kneeling body and turns towards Sterling and me. Her features instantly morph into a mask of maternal pride and righteous indignation. "I always knew he was a fraud," Yvonne declares loudly, ensuring every executive in the room can hear her dramatic pivot. "I told you, Kiara. I always told you this man was entirely beneath you. A thief, a degenerate gambler. How dare he bring this kind of humiliation into our family?" She reaches out, attempting to place a supportive, loving hand on my arm, seamlessly throwing the man she championed just yesterday directly under the tracks of the oncoming train. "Thank God you found a real man, Kiara," Yvonne says, smiling widely at Sterling, her eyes practically vibrating with greed. "Thank God you cut this dead weight loose before he ruined us all." Yvonne's heels strike the polished marble floor with a sharp, rhythmic clack that echoes above the low murmur of the stunned crowd. She does not hesitate. She does not offer a hand of comfort or even a glance of pity to the man sobbing at her feet. She literally steps right over Julian's trembling body. The heavy silk hem of her sapphire gown brushes against his shoulder as she dismisses his entire existence. Julian is no longer a rising vice president. Therefore, he is no longer of any use to her. He is a discarded stepping stone. Yvonne approaches me with her arms spread wide, her face stretched into a mask of pure, unadulterated joy. It is a performance worthy of an Academy Award, a seamless, instantaneous pivot from cruel elitist to a fiercely proud mother. She makes sure to angle her body perfectly so that the Zenith Capital executives, and more importantly the cluster of her high society church friends she invited tonight, have a flawless view of her maternal devotion. My brilliant daughter Yvonne projects her voice, ensuring the warm theatrical tone carries over the vast expanse of the ballroom. "I always knew you were destined for greatness. I always knew you would marry a billionaire." The sheer, breathtaking audacity of her statement hangs in the air, toxic and suffocating. She genuinely believes I am going to play along with this charade. She assumes that because we are in public surrounded by conservative billionaires and elite socialites, I will bow to the unwritten oppressive rules of family decorum and accept her embrace. She thinks the intimidating presence of extreme wealth will force me into quiet submission just as it always has in the past. I take a slow, deliberate step backward. Her outstretched arms grasp nothing but empty air. "Save it, Yvonne," I say, my voice cutting through the room with razor-sharp precision. I do not lower my volume. I do not hedge my words. I speak clearly and confidently, operating in pure clinical strategy. Less than 24 hours ago, you sat at this exact venue and called me a loud, stubborn failure. You looked me directly in the eye and told me I was an unrefined liability who drove a good man away. You do not get to claim my success now. You do not get to share my spotlight when you contributed absolutely nothing to my life but doubt and sabotage. Yvonne's arms drop rigidly to her sides. The pristine, aristocratic smile freezes on her face, the edges of her facade cracking violently under the bright amber lights. She takes a quick, frantic glance at the group of church friends standing near the floral arches. These are the women she has spent decades impressing, with fabricated stories of her vast wealth, her flawless parenting, and her unwavering moral superiority. "Kiara, darling." "Please," Yvonne hisses under her breath, a desperate, venomous whisper meant only for me and Sterling to hear. "You are making a terrible scene. We can discuss this later in private. You are embarrassing the family in front of very important people." "There is no family to embarrass," I reply, my voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "There is only a collection of parasites who have spent 35 years feeding off my ambition while tearing me down to make themselves feel taller. But since you invited your entire high society congregation here tonight to witness a corporate triumph, let us give them a true story. Let us talk about family legacy, Yvonne. Let us talk about your immense sacrifices." Yvonne's eyes dart wildly around the room. She reaches out a manicured hand to grab my wrist, a desperate attempt to physically silence me. Sterling immediately shifts his stance. He moves his large, broad-shouldered frame just a fraction of an inch, placing himself like a wall of solid granite between us. His dark eyes lock onto my mother, daring her to make contact. Yvonne shrinks back instantly, entirely powerless against a man who could buy and sell her entire social circle before his morning coffee gets cold. I turn my attention directly to the cluster of wealthy women who form the core of Yvonne's social hierarchy. I lock eyes with Mrs. Harrington, the head of the charity committee, and Mrs. Dubois, the country club president. They are watching with wide, horrified eyes, completely captivated by the total unraveling of the great Yvonne. "For years, my mother has told you all about her incredible sacrifices," I announce, owning the physical space of the room completely. "She has regaled you with endless tales of her selfless devotion to her daughters. But she conveniently left out the financial reality of those grand sacrifices. 10 years ago, when I was accepted into a top-tier university, I went to access my college fund. I discovered the account was completely empty. It had been entirely drained. I stepped closer to my mother, locking my gaze onto her terrified, trembling face. "Tell them where the money went, Yvonne." I command, the years of suppressed rage fueling my absolute authority. "Tell your friends how you stole the money my late father specifically set aside for my education to pay for Chantel's lavish destination wedding in Aspen. Tell them how you left your youngest daughter with absolutely nothing, so your golden child could have ice sculptures, a 10-tier cake, and a luxury honeymoon." Gasps echo loudly from the group of church friends. Mrs. Harrington covers her mouth with her hand, physically stepping away from Yvonne. My mother recoils as if I have struck her across the face. "I worked 3 jobs. I continue, my voice gaining unstoppable momentum. I slept 4 hours a night to pay my own tuition. I built a crisis management empire from the ground up, fighting for every single inch of territory in a male-dominated industry. I ghostwrote the very corporate strategies that Julian used to secure his job while you sat in your parlor and mocked my career as a glorified hobby. You called me rough. You called me unrefined. You told everyone I lacked the grace required for high society." I reach into the metallic clutch bag at my side and pull out the third and final black leather dossier. It is remarkably light considering the absolute crushing destruction it holds inside. And the ultimate irony, I say, my voice dropping to a deadly quiet register that forces the entire massive ballroom to lean in and listen. The ultimate hypocrisy, Yvonne, is that the pristine old money lifestyle you project to this room is entirely funded by the daughter you actively despise. You have spent the last 5 years living in a sprawling historic estate, claiming you inherited it free and clear. You did not. My father left that house with a massive unpaid second mortgage that was days away from putting you on the street. Yvonne shakes her head rapidly, tears of absolute panic spilling down her heavily contoured cheeks. No, Kiara, please do not do this. Please not here. I paid off the bank 5 years ago. I state, dropping the heavy truth like a falling anvil. I bought the debt. I hold the deed to the estate. You have been living rent-free, maintaining your fake aristocratic facade on the absolute grace of the daughter you just tried to throw out of the family. I hold out the black folder. Yvonne stares at it, her hands shaking violently. Inside this folder is a formal, legally binding eviction notice. I say, my tone entirely devoid of mercy. You have 30 days to vacate my property. I suggest you start packing your designer gowns tonight. Perhaps your successful married daughter can offer you her guest room. Oh wait, Preston's firm is bankrupt and they have no money either. I drop the dossier onto the marble floor right at her feet. The room is completely silent save for the sound of Julian quietly sobbing behind us. The execution is flawless. The matriarch of the family, the woman who ruled through manipulation, elitism, and psychological cruelty, has been completely stripped of her armor in front of the exact people she sought to impress. Her church friends turn their backs to her, whispering furiously amongst themselves. The Zenith Capital executives look on with a mixture of awe and sheer terror, deeply respecting the absolute ruthlessness of the display. Yvonne's knees buckle. She drops to the marble floor, landing right beside the ruined Julian. She covers her face with her hands, weeping hysterically, the grand illusion of her entire life completely shattered into pieces. I turn back to Sterling. He offers me a slow, predatory smile of absolute approval. We have executed the plan to perfection. The cancer has been cut out, but a dying beast always thrashes before the end. A sharp, furious shriek cuts through the heavy atmosphere of the ballroom. Chantel pushes her way violently through the crowd of stunned executives. Her face is bright red, contorted with an ugly, unhinged rage that completely destroys her delicate, polished features. She is stomping toward us in her designer heels, her fists clenched tight at her sides. Preston is right behind her, his face pale and sweating, looking exactly like a man who knows he is walking directly into a wood chipper, but cannot stop his wife from dragging him along. Chantel cannot process the reality of the situation. Her brain simply refuses to accept that her fake billionaire lifestyle is over, that her mother is ruined, and that the sister she has bullied her entire life is now an untouchable titan. "You vindictive liar!" Chantel screams, pointing a shaking finger directly at my face. She completely ignores the intimidating, lethal presence of Sterling standing right beside me. "You are making all of this up. You are just jealous. You have always been jealous of me." She stops a few feet away, breathing heavily, her chest heaving as she glares at me. Preston stands frozen behind her, looking at the floor. "I am calling the police," Chantel threatens, her voice echoing shrilly across the room. "I am going to have you arrested for harassment. We are going to sue you for defamation. We will take every single penny of that little consulting business you claim to own. You are not going to get away with humiliating our family like this." Preston steps aggressively in front of his wife, throwing his shoulders back and puffing out his chest. He adopts a wide, dominating stance, desperately trying to project the intimidating aura of an old money patriarch protecting his fragile family. It is a pathetic, transparent performance, especially when executed in a room filled with actual self-made billionaires and ruthless corporate titans. Preston straightens the lapels of his poorly fitted tweed jacket and glares at me with a mixture of profound condescension and absolute panic. He leans heavily into his white privilege and his fabricated Nantucket lineage, operating under the deeply flawed assumption that sheer arrogance can shield him from a targeted financial strike. "You are completely out of your depth, Kiara." Preston says, his voice booming across the silent ballroom. He points a trembling, accusatory finger at my face. You march in here wearing a dress you clearly manipulated another man into buying, making wild, baseless accusations against your own mother and my colleague. I will not allow you to harass my family. You think because you run some localized amateur public relations firm that you understand how the real world operates. My family has been a cornerstone of this state's real estate market for 3 generations. We belong to an elite tier of society that you will never comprehend. I have the most aggressive litigation attorneys on retainer, men who play golf with federal judges. If you do not turn around and walk out of those doors right now, I will personally see to it that you are sued for every penny you claim to have. I will strip your little consulting business for parts and leave you bankrupt. Preston then makes the fatal mistake of turning his attention away from me and directing his bravado toward my husband. He looks at Sterling, attempting to establish some kind of twisted elite brotherhood. Sir, I do not know what kind of lies this woman has been feeding you, Preston says, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial man-to-man register. But you need to understand that Kiara is a deeply unstable individual. She is a resentful, classless gold digger who is actively trying to ruin her sister's happiness out of pure spite. You are a respected executive. You do not want your massive corporate reputation tied to a ghetto street hustler who throws temper tantrums in country clubs. I strongly advise you to walk away from her before she drags your stock prices down with her. Sterling does not flinch. He does not raise his voice. He does not even blink. He simply stands beside me, his hands resting casually in the pockets of his midnight black tuxedo, radiating a cold, lethal authority that makes Preston's fake bravado look like a child playing dress-up. Sterling looks at Preston with eyes as hard and unforgiving as obsidian. He lets the heavy, agonizing silence stretch out for 10 agonizing seconds, allowing Preston's pathetic words to echo and die in the vast, amber-lit ballroom. My wife handles her own exterminations. Sterling finally replies, his voice a low, terrifying rumble that completely paralyzes the room. I am just here to watch the rats run. I do not give Preston a single second to recover from the sheer terror of hearing Sterling validate my position as his absolute equal. I raise my left hand and snap my fingers once. The sharp sound cuts through the air like a cracking whip. From the shadowy perimeter of the grand ballroom, Tasha steps forward into the light. My lead corporate investigator is a vision of absolute merciless competence. She is wearing a razor-sharp crimson power suit, her heels clicking aggressively against the marble floor. She moves with the fluid, predatory grace of a woman who makes a living ripping the secrets out of corrupt executives. In her right hand, she holds the second heavy black leather dossier bearing the Zenith Capital crest. Tasha stops directly in front of Preston. She flashes him a bright, terrifying, and completely hollow smile. She shoves the thick folder forcefully against his chest, forcing him to take it or let it drop to the floor. Preston reflexively grabs the leather binding, his knuckles turning stark white. Since Preston is so eager to discuss his illustrious 3-generation real estate dynasty, let us open the books. I announce, my voice projecting clearly to the captive audience of Zenith Capital board members and terrified high society church friends. I do not need to read from the folder. I have the entire financial autopsy memorized down to the last decimal point. Your grandfather was not a shipping magnate in Nantucket, Preston. I state, stripping away his origin story with surgical precision. He was a commercial plumber in New Jersey, which is a perfectly respectable profession, but it does not come with a trust fund. Your entire pedigree is a complete and utter fabrication. You are a desperately broke man wearing a rich man's costume. Preston swallows hard, the sweat on his forehead visibly gleaming under the lights. Chantel grabs his arm, her eyes darting frantically between me and her husband, waiting for him to shut me down. He says nothing. He is completely paralyzed. Your luxury real estate firm is a rotting corpse. I continue stepping closer to them, invading their physical space and forcing them to shrink backward. You have not closed a single legitimate commercial property deal in 14 months. The market completely shifted, your lenders realized you were wildly incompetent, and your institutional backing completely dried up. But instead of adjusting your lifestyle, instead of telling your high-maintenance wife that the money was gone, you decided to get creative. You started running a localized, highly illegal Ponzi scheme. A collective gasp rises from the wealthy executives. In this room, financial fraud is the ultimate unforgivable sin. Preston shakes his head rapidly, but his eyes are wide with the undeniable terror of a guilty man. You have been systematically raiding your clients' escrow accounts. I declare, raising my voice so the accusation rings out like a judge delivering a sentence. You have been taking the earnest money deposits from young, hard-working families trying to buy their first homes, and you have been funneling those funds directly into your personal checking accounts to maintain the illusion of your wealth. You stole down payments to buy first-class tickets to Paris. You emptied commercial escrow accounts to keep your wife draped in designer labels and premium champagne. You are not a real estate mogul, Preston. You are a common, desperate thief. That is a lie, Chantel shrieks, her voice piercing the air. Preston, tell her she is a liar. Tell them we are wealthy. Tell them about the investments. Preston cannot look at his wife. He stares blankly at the black dossier in his hands, his breathing shallow and erratic. It gets infinitely worse, Chantel, I say, pivoting my absolute focus entirely onto my sister. I look at her perfectly styled hair, her expensive silk dress, and the massive diamond engagement ring glittering on her finger. I am about to tear down the only thing she has ever truly loved. Yesterday afternoon, you drove to my apartment complex in a brand new, fully loaded luxury Tesla. I remind her, my tone laced with dark, vindictive satisfaction. You made sure to rev the engine loudly. You made sure to park it directly in front of my practical sedan. You stood in the lobby and loudly bragged about how your incredibly successful, wealthy husband bought it for you on a random Tuesday just because he loves you so much. You used that car to mock my life, to belittle my choices, and to prove that you had somehow won the ultimate prize. Chantel lifts her chin defiantly, attempting to hold on to her fragile superiority. He did buy it for me, because he is a provider, because he actually takes care of his wife. He bought it for you using $75,000 of stolen escrow funds. I fire back the truth, slamming into her like a physical blow. That car is stolen property, Chantel. You are driving around in a vehicle funded entirely by federal crimes, and because your husband is an arrogant amateur, he did not even buy it outright. He financed it through the exact same commercial lender that currently holds the massive defaulting lien on his failing brokerage firm. I take a slow, highly deliberate pause, letting the absolute horror of the situation sink deep into their bones. The lender was completely unaware of the escrow theft. Until this morning, I explain, a sharp, dangerous smile spreading across my lips. I made a very quick, anonymous phone call. I provided them with the direct routing numbers linking the stolen escrow funds to the down payment on your new vehicle. The bank immediately accelerated the default on Preston's entire portfolio. The accounts are frozen. The credit cards in your purse are currently declining. You have absolutely zero liquid capital. Chantel's eyes widen in sheer, unadulterated panic. She instinctively clutches her designer handbag tighter against her chest, as if she can physically protect her vanishing wealth. And regarding that beautiful, fully loaded Tesla you love so much, I add, pointing a manicured finger toward the massive arched windows that overlook the Oak Grove Country Club parking lot, I highly suggest you take a long look outside. Because the bank moved swiftly. Right now, there is a repossession agent hooking your brand new car to the back of a flatbed tow truck in the VIP section of the parking lot. It will be gone before midnight. Chantel whips her head around, staring out the glass windows. Through the darkness and the illuminated lamps of the country club exterior, the flashing yellow lights of a commercial tow truck are clearly visible. The reality of her immediate crushing poverty crashes down on her all at once. The fake empire she used to torment me has been completely vaporized. Chantel shatters. The pristine, elegant, untouchable golden child dissolves into a frantic, unhinged mess. She violently rips the black dossier out of Preston's trembling hands and tears it open. She stares at the printed bank statements, the highlighted red deficits, and the glaring, undeniable proof of the federal subpoenas waiting for them on Monday morning. She drops the folder, the papers scattering across the marble floor. She turns on Preston like a rabid animal. Her face contorts into a mask of pure, ugly fury. "Is this true?" she screams, her voice cracking as she shoves him hard in the chest. "Tell me she is lying, Preston. Tell me we are not broke. Tell me you did not steal that money." Preston stumbles backward, his hands raised defensively, completely incapable of defending himself. "Chantel, please," he begs, his voice pathetic and weak. "I was going to put the money back. I just needed one more big commercial close. I only did it to give you the life you demanded. You said you would leave me if we had to downgrade." "You pathetic loser!" Chantel shrieks, hitting him again, tears of pure rage and humiliation streaming down her face. "You ruined my life. I am not going to be poor. I am not going to jail for you. I am leaving you. I am filing for divorce tonight." The room watches in captivated, horrifying silence as the perfect golden couple completely self-destructs on the marble floor. Chantel is screaming, Preston is begging, and the entire high society congregation witnesses the ugly, shallow reality of their marriage. Their love was entirely conditional on stolen money, and now that the money is gone, they are tearing each other to pieces. I stand beside Sterling, my custom silk gown catching the ambient light, watching the flawless execution of my enemies. The room is mine. The victory is absolute. The ballroom is a tableau of absolute devastation. Chantel is practically hyperventilating, her perfectly manicured nails digging fiercely into Preston's lapels as she shakes his rigid frame. She is screaming, demanding answers he simply cannot give. Preston has retreated completely inside himself, his eyes vacant, his jaw slack. He looks exactly like a man who knows he will be sleeping in a federal holding cell before the weekend is over. To their right, Yvonne remains crumpled on the polished marble floor. Her structured sapphire gown is bunched awkwardly around her knees. She makes no effort to maintain her modesty or her aristocratic posture. She is sobbing heavily, her chest heaving, the expensive mascara running down her cheeks in thick, dark tracks. She reaches out a trembling hand toward Mrs. Harrington and the cluster of church socialites she spent her entire life trying to impress. She begs them for help, for an intervention, for a single ounce of pity. They physically take a collective step backward. Mrs. Dubois turns her head away, her nose wrinkled in utter disgust. The rejection is absolute and final. And then there is Julian. He has not moved from his kneeling position. The pool of shattered crystal from his dropped champagne glass surrounds him. He is staring at the black dossier on the floor as if it is a live explosive. He has lost his career, his reputation, and his freedom in the span of 10 minutes. Sterling stands beside me perfectly still. He watches the four of them writhe in their self-inflicted misery with the cold, detached interest of a scientist observing insects in a glass jar. He does not gloat. He does not need to. True power does not require a victory lap. True power simply exists. Sterling raises his right hand and gives a single subtle nod toward the back of the ballroom. The heavy oak doors swing open again. This time, there is no music. There is only the synchronized rhythmic thud of heavy boots striking the marble. 8 men step into the ballroom. They are Zenith Capital's private elite security detail. They are dressed in immaculate black suits, earpieces curled tightly around their ears. They move with terrifying military precision, parting the crowd of executives and investors effortlessly. They approach the center of the room and immediately fan out completely, surrounding the 4 broken figures on the floor. The lead security officer, a massive, broad-shouldered man with a face carved from granite, stops directly in front of Julian. He reaches down, grabs Julian by the upper arm, and hauls him to his feet with zero effort. Julian lets out a pathetic, startled yelp. His legs wobble, unable to support his own weight, forcing the security officer to essentially drag him upright. "It is time to leave," the officer states. His voice is flat, carrying no emotion, completely immune to the staggering display of wealth in the room. Julian tries to pull his arm away. "Get your hands off me. I am a vice president. I demand to speak to human resources." "You are a trespasser," Sterling corrects him, his voice slicing through Julian's panic. And if you resist my security detail, I will have you arrested for criminal trespassing before the FBI even has a chance to file their embezzlement warrants. Walk. Julian's resistance crumbles instantly. The fight drains out of him. He drops his head, his shoulders slumping in total defeat, and allows two guards to flank him. Next, the guards move to Yvonne. They do not offer her a hand. They simply stand over her, casting long, intimidating shadows across her kneeling form. Yvonne looks up at them, her eyes wide with terror. She scrambles to her feet, her expensive heels slipping on the marble. She tries to smooth down her ruined dress, desperately attempting to salvage a single shred of her ruined dignity. "I will walk myself out," Yvonne declares, her voice trembling violently. She looks around the room one last time, making desperate eye contact with her former friends. "This is a misunderstanding. Kiara is simply confused. I will call all of you tomorrow." No one responds. No one even nods. The silence from the high society crowd is deafening. They look at her as if she is already a ghost. Yvonne lets out a ragged sob and turns away, marching stiffly toward the exit with two guards right on her heels. Preston requires no physical coercion. The moment a guard steps into his peripheral vision, Preston simply turns and begins walking toward the doors. He looks completely hollowed out, a dead man walking. He leaves the second black dossier lying on the floor. He does not even look back at his wife. Chantel, however, refuses to go quietly. When the final two guards approach her, she completely snaps. She swings her designer handbag, wildly striking one of the massive men in the shoulder. He does not even flinch. He simply reaches out, grabs the handbag, and effortlessly pulls it from her grasp, holding it completely out of her reach. "Do not touch me!" Chantel shrieks, her voice reaching an unbearable pitch. "You cannot do this. I am an elite. I am going to sue every single one of you. Preston, do something, Preston." But Preston is already halfway across the ballroom, flanked by security, disappearing into the shadows of the exit. He does not turn around. He does not come to save her. The White Knight has completely abandoned the castle. Chantel realizes she is entirely alone. She looks at me, her face twisted with a level of hatred that is genuinely terrifying. "You are going to burn in hell for this, Kiara? You hear me? You are nothing. You are a caterer. You are trash." I look at her, my expression completely serene. I do not raise my voice. I do not engage in her hysteria. I simply deliver the final crushing blow. "Enjoy the walk home, Chantel. I hear it is quite chilly outside tonight." The guards do not give her another second to scream. They step in on either side of her, gripping her arms firmly and physically march her toward the back of the ballroom. Chantel kicks, she thrashes, she screams wildly about her ruined shoes and her stolen Tesla, completely oblivious to the fact that every single wealthy investor in the room is watching her with absolute unadulterated disgust. She is throwing a toddler's temper tantrum in front of the most powerful financial titans in the country. Her social execution is complete. I watch them go. I watch the security detail march my tormentors down the long, amber-lit aisle. I watch Julian stumble. I watch Yvonne wipe her ruined face. I watch Preston walk like a zombie. And I watch Chantel thrash against the men, removing her from the premises. They reach the back of the room. The guards push them through the threshold. The heavy double oak doors swing shut. They hit the frame with a resounding, thunderous thud that echoes through the vast ballroom. The latch clicks into place. The physical lock engages. The sound signifies the absolute end of their reign. They are gone. They have been excised from my life permanently. A profound, heavy silence settles over the Oak Grove Country Club. The tension that had been choking the air for the last 20 minutes begins to dissipate, evaporating like smoke. The amber lighting seems to grow warmer. The towering arrangements of imported white orchids look brighter, more vibrant. The suffocating weight of my mother's elitism, my sister's jealousy, and Julian's toxic arrogance has been completely lifted from my shoulders. I stand in the exact center of the room. I slowly turn away from the closed doors and face the remaining crowd. The Zenith Capital executives, the London investors, the senior board members, they are all staring at me. They are no longer looking at a quiet, supportive corporate wife. They are looking at the woman who just ruthlessly decapitated 4 separate enemies in under 20 minutes without ever raising her voice. They are looking at the true strategic architect behind their most successful acquisitions. They are looking at an absolute apex predator. I see Tasha standing near the front row. My lead corporate investigator offers me a sharp, approving nod. The loyal members of my crisis management team, the people who have worked silently in the shadows for years, are scattered throughout the crowd. They are all standing a little taller now, recognizing that our time hiding behind Julian's fraudulent facade is officially over. We own the firm now. Sterling steps up beside me. He does not take my hand. He does not need to claim me. He simply stands at my side, projecting a unified front of absolute terrifying power. He looks out at his board of directors, implicitly demanding their total submission to the new reality. I turn my attention to the small, polished stage set up near the front of the ballroom. A sleek black microphone rests on a silver stand in the center of the platform. It is the exact same microphone Julian used 24 hours earlier to publicly humiliate me, the exact microphone he used to mock my career and announce his fake brilliance to the world. I walk toward the stage. My custom ivory silk bridal gown flows flawlessly behind me, the Swarovski crystals catching the light and casting fractured rainbows across the marble floor. The crowd silently parts to let me through. No one dares to step in my way. No one dares to speak. They simply watch in absolute awe as I ascend the 3 short steps to the platform. I step up to the silver stand. I reach out and grip the cool metal of the microphone. I pull it smoothly from its cradle. I take a slow, deep breath, letting the clean, untainted air fill my lungs. I look out over the sea of wealthy, powerful faces, my eyes tracing the lines of the floral arches and the sparkling chandeliers. This is my venue, this is my night, this is my empire. This is... I bring the microphone to my lips. My voice rings out crystal clear, echoing with absolute, unquestionable authority. Now that the liabilities have been removed, I announce, let's proceed with the wedding. The acoustic resonance of my voice through the microphone washes over the vast ballroom, instantly breaking the heavy, stunned paralysis that had gripped the crowd. A sudden collective exhale sweeps through the room. The tension shatters, replaced by a ripple of genuine, sophisticated applause. At the back of the room, the audiovisual technician, finally receiving a cue, he understands, brings the ambient lighting up to a soft, romantic gold. The string quartet, previously hidden in the alcove, begins to play a rich, sweeping arrangement of a classic symphony. The music fills the void left by my family's disgraceful exit, wrapping the room in an atmosphere of refined elegance. I step down from the small stage and glide back toward the center aisle. Sterling is waiting for me. He stands directly beneath the towering architectural archway of imported Thai orchids that I meticulously designed. The bright white petals cascade around him, framing his broad shoulders and the sharp, immaculate lines of his midnight black tuxedo. As I approach him, the cold, predatory edge that we both wielded just moments ago melts away. It is replaced by something far more dangerous, because it is entirely real. I place my hand in his. His grip is firm, anchoring me to the marble floor, radiating a profound heat that cuts through the chill of the corporate warfare we just waged. We turn together to face the officiant, a highly respected federal circuit judge who has been a silent observer in the front row this entire time. The judge steps forward, a warm, knowing smile playing on his lips, fully aware that he is about to formalize the most formidable partnership in the financial sector. The traditional pleasantries are entirely discarded. We do not need a lecture on patience or compromise. We require no outdated scripts about obedience. When the judge prompts us for our vows, the ballroom falls into a hushed, reverent silence. The executives and investors lean in, desperate to witness the foundation of this ultimate power couple. Sterling turns to fully face me. He does not use a written script. He looks directly into my eyes, his gaze stripping away the armor I wear for the rest of the world. In our world, loyalty is a currency that most people counterfeit. Sterling begins, his deep voice carrying effortlessly without a microphone. I spent my entire life surrounded by people who wanted to extract value from my name, my firm, and my legacy. I expected to spend my life guarding that fortress alone. Then you walked into my boardroom. You did not ask for a seat at the table. You built your own table, forced them to sit at it, and dictated the terms. You possess a brilliant, ruthless, and beautiful mind. You are the only person who has ever looked at me and seen an equal. He takes a step closer, his thumb gently brushing across my knuckles. I do not vow to lead you, Kiara. Sterling says, the raw sincerity in his tone sending a shiver down my spine. I vow to stand exactly beside you. I vow to be the shield at your back and the sword in your hand. I promise to fuel your ambition, to respect your genius, and to defend our empire against anyone foolish enough to challenge us. You are my partner, my equal, and my wife. My loyalty to you is absolute, and it is forever. A profound stillness blankets the room. The raw, unfiltered truth of his words resonates through the high society crowd. It is my turn. I look at this man, this terrifying titan of industry who has placed his entire trust in my hands, and I feel an overwhelming surge of fierce devotion. For 35 years, I was told to make myself small so others could feel tall. I say, my voice steady, clear, and ringing with absolute conviction. I was taught that blood was the only bond that mattered, even as that blood bled me dry. I learned to survive in the shadows, building value for people who lacked the vision to build it themselves. But you brought me into the light. You did not try to tame my ambition. You recognized it, you matched it, and you demanded that I demand more. I hold his gaze, letting him see the absolute certainty in my soul. I vow to be your sharpest strategist and your most unwavering ally. I continue. I vow to protect our shared legacy with the exact same ruthlessness we demonstrated tonight. Where others see obstacles, we will find acquisitions. Where others see ruin, we will find opportunity. You are the only man worthy of my trust, and I am the only woman capable of matching your fire. We are building an empire, Sterling, and I promise to rule it fiercely by your side until the end of our days. The judge asks for the rings. Tasha steps forward smoothly, handing Sterling a heavy platinum band, while Sterling's chief operating officer hands me a matching ring. As Sterling slides the cool metal onto my finger, the massive, flawless diamond engagement ring catches the golden light, sending brilliant flashes across his dark lapel. I slide his ring into place, sealing the contract. The judge pronounces us husband and wife. Sterling pulls me in his hands, framing my face. His kiss is not a polite, performative peck for the cameras. It is deep, claiming, and intensely passionate, a physical manifestation of the ironclad bond we have just forged. The ballroom erupts. The applause is deafening, genuine, and thunderous. The transition into the reception is completely seamless. The heavy atmosphere of the execution is entirely forgotten, replaced by the intoxicating energy of celebration. The jazz band strikes up a lively, sophisticated rhythm. Waiters in crisp white jackets flood the floor, carrying silver trays loaded with the vintage champagne and imported truffles that Julian had so desperately tried to claim credit for. Now they are celebrating the true architect of the evening. Sterling and I do not sit at a secluded sweetheart table. We command the room. We walk through the crowd, and the parting of the sea is absolute. The Zenith Capital executives, the men who previously looked right through me, now approach with a mixture of deep reverence and healthy terror. They understand the fundamental shift in the universe. They know exactly who holds the power. The senior board member, a notoriously difficult London investor named Harrison, approaches me with a fresh flute of champagne. He bows his head slightly, a gesture of respect he reserves for very few. Kiara. Harrison says, his tone completely stripped of the casual superiority he used with Julian. I have to admit, when the Vanguard crisis response was presented, I found the localized integration strategy to be nothing short of genius. To discover that you were the mind behind that maneuver changes everything. Your foresight saved us millions. Thank you, Harrison, I reply smoothly, accepting the champagne. The Vanguard situation required a delicate touch to avoid a public relations disaster, but a firm hand to renegotiate the vendor contracts. Julian lacked the capacity for nuance. Going forward, you will find that Zenith's crisis management division operates with far more efficiency now that the middleman has been permanently removed. Harrison laughs a deep, hearty sound. I have absolutely no doubt about that. Here is to the new era of Zenith Capital. He raises his glass. The surrounding executives raise theirs in unison. They are toasting to my brilliance, actively aligning themselves with the new regime. Throughout the night, the conversations continue. I dissect market trends, discuss upcoming aggressive mergers, and outline my vision for the public relations sector of the firm. Tasha and my loyal colleagues mingle with the board members, their own status instantly elevated by the revelation of our true capabilities. The fake, suffocating prestige that my mother and sister brought to this venue has been completely scrubbed clean. It has been replaced by genuine, unadulterated power. As the clock creeps past midnight, the energy in the ballroom begins to mellow. The jazz band switches to a slow, sultry melody. The crowd thins out as the older executives head to their waiting black cars. Sterling approaches me, wrapping his arm securely around my waist. He leans down, his breath warm against my neck. "You look like a conqueror," he murmurs. "I feel like one," I reply, leaning into his solid frame. He guides me away from the remaining guests, leading me toward the massive glass doors that open onto the sweeping second-floor balcony. We step out into the cool, crisp night air. The manicured grounds of the Oak Grove Country Club stretch out below us, bathed in the silver light of the moon. The valet station is empty now, save for Sterling's armored Maybach waiting patiently in the VIP circle. The tow truck that hauled away Chantel's Tesla is long gone, leaving behind nothing but an empty parking space. Sterling takes off his tuxedo jacket and drapes it over my bare shoulders, pulling the lapels tight around my chest to ward off the chill. I cross my arms over the fine wool, breathing in the scent of his cologne. We stand in silence for a long moment, looking out over the quiet estate. The war in this ballroom is won. The cancer has been cut out. I have my empire, my vindication, and a partner who matches my exact frequency. I have stripped my abusers of their wealth, their status, and their pride. But as I look out into the darkness, my strategic mind continues to turn. Yvonne has 30 days to vacate my property. Chantel is currently experiencing her first night of absolute poverty, preparing for a vicious divorce. Preston is likely meeting with defense attorneys, realizing he has no money to pay them. Julian is staring down a federal indictment. They have lost everything. But I know my family. Desperation breeds a very specific kind of madness. The initial shock will eventually wear off, and when it does, the panic will set in. They will scramble. They will try to find a loophole, a weakness, or a way to drag me down into the mud with them. The public execution was flawless, but I know the true aftermath is just beginning. 3 months later. The morning sun strikes the floor-to-ceiling reinforced glass of my corner office, casting long, sharp shadows across the imported Italian marble floor. I sit behind a massive, custom-built desk of reclaimed ebony, the quiet hum of the city vibrating softly beneath me. My public relations and crisis management firm is no longer a quiet operation running in the shadows of Zenith Capital. It is an internationally recognized empire. We dictate the narratives of Fortune 500 companies. We crush scandals before they hit the press. We build kings and we dethrone them. I rest my left hand on the polished wood, watching the flawless, breathtaking diamond on my ring finger catch the light. It is a brilliant, heavy, and constant reminder of the night I stopped playing the victim and became the executioner. The corporate world moves with brutal efficiency, but it has a long, unforgiving memory. The natural consequences of the Zenith Capital Gala ripped through the financial sector like a shockwave, leaving nothing but scorched earth in its wake. Julian was the first to face the firing squad. The morning after Sterling terminated him, the black leather dossier I compiled was handed directly to the federal authorities. The corporate blacklist was instantaneous. In the world of high finance, a man might survive a bad investment, but he will never survive stealing from the house. Julian was immediately stripped of his licenses, his reputation reduced to a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms. He is currently facing severe multi-count felony charges for wire fraud and corporate embezzlement. The high-powered defense attorneys he desperately sought refused to take his calls. They require massive retainers, and Julian's bank accounts were completely frozen the moment the investigation launched. I have it on excellent authority from my investigators that the former rising star of Zenith Capital is currently working the graveyard shift at a massive sterile logistics warehouse. He spends his nights wearing a cheap synthetic uniform, moving heavy cardboard boxes for minimum wage, desperately trying to scrape together enough cash to pay the bottom-tier public defender, who is legally obligated to represent him. Every time he clocks in under those harsh fluorescent lights, he has to remember the tailored charcoal suits and the vintage champagne he threw away for a gamble he could not afford. But Julian's destruction was simply collateral damage compared to the absolute humiliating ruin of the Golden Child. Preston's pathetic facade of old money superiority completely crumbled the moment the federal agents raided his boutique real estate firm. The bank had accelerated the default on his massive loans exactly as I promised, but the financial audit revealed a labyrinth of stolen escrow funds that sent the federal investigators into an absolute frenzy. Preston was formally indicted for major real estate fraud. His assets were seized. His luxury vehicles were towed away in the middle of the night. His supposed elite connections completely vanished into thin air, refusing to answer his desperate phone calls, leaving him exposed as nothing but a common desperate thief playing dress-up. And Chantel, my beautiful, arrogant, violently spoiled sister, finally got the reality check she spent her entire life avoiding. The bank foreclosed on their sprawling suburban mansion in a matter of weeks. Stripped of her stolen luxury, Chantel was forced to pack whatever she could carry and move into a cramped, dingy, low-income apartment complex on the absolute outskirts of the city. My investigators sent me the photographs, the peeling linoleum floors, the rusted chain-link fence outside her window, the stark, undeniable reality of her new life. The Golden Child who once mocked my practical sedan and demanded imported ice sculptures for her wedding is currently spending her days taking badly lit photographs of the designer bags Yvonne bought her. She is haggling with strangers on online resale platforms, selling off her Chanel and Hermes pieces at a fraction of their cost just to afford basic groceries and electricity. The pristine, untouchable princess of the family is completely broken, suffocating under the weight of the exact same poverty she used to mock. The quiet chime of the intercom on my desk breaks through my thoughts. I press the silver button acknowledging my lead assistant. Yes, Tasha. I say, my voice steady and clear. I apologize for the interruption, Kiara. Tasha replies, her tone carrying a distinct edge of professional disdain. The old personal line we kept active for the final legal routing just received a voicemail. It bypassed the block. I thought you should be aware before I permanently scrub the server. It is from your mother. I lean back in my leather chair. A slow, chilling realization washes over me. The final piece of the collapse has hit the ground. Route it to my private speaker, I instruct, and then permanently disconnect that number. A sharp beep echoes through my office, followed immediately by the trembling, ragged sound of Yvonne breathing heavily into the receiver. I sit perfectly still, listening as the voice of the woman who tormented me for 35 years fills the room. It is completely devoid of the haughty, aristocratic cadence she spent decades perfecting. The severe, structured matriarch is gone. In her place is a desperate, broken, and utterly defeated woman. Kiara, please, please pick up the phone. Yvonne begs, her voice cracking violently. I know you are angry. I know I made mistakes, but you have to help us. You have to. She lets out a wet, pathetic sob, and the sound brings absolutely no pity to my heart. They threw me out, Yvonne cries, referring to the high society African-American church community that had been her entire universe. Mrs. Harrington and the committee. They had security escort me out of the Sunday service. They will not take my calls. They look at me like I am a disease. I close my eyes, picturing the exact moment her pristine matriarchal image shattered among her peers. That church community was the only thing she ever truly cared about. It was her stage, her kingdom, and her primary weapon. She had spent her entire adult life fabricating a narrative of immense wealth and flawless parenting, looking down on the congregation from her self-appointed throne. When the truth of the eviction, the stolen college fund, and Chantel's criminal husband hit the rumor mill, the social execution would have been swift and merciless. She was stripped of all her bragging rights. She is now an absolute social pariah cast out by the very women she used to manipulate. I have nowhere to go. Yvonne's voice continues devolving into a frantic hyperventilating plea. The estate is gone. I am staying in a cheap motel. Chantel is crying every day. Preston is going to prison. Kiara, you have so much money now. You have everything. I just need a small loan. Just a little bit of cash to help your sister get back on her feet. Please, you are my daughter. You cannot just leave us like this. The voicemail cuts off with an automated click. The silence returns to my office, heavy and profound. I reach out and press the delete button on my console. The digital file is instantly wiped from existence. I do not feel a single second of hesitation. I do not feel a shred of guilt. I stand up and walk slowly toward the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over the sprawling metallic skyline of the city. A powerful realization washes over me, settling deep into my bones. For years they convinced me that I was the villain, the difficult child, the ungrateful liability who was holding the family back. But looking at the smoking ruins of their lives, the truth is entirely clear. I did not actively destroy my family. I did not plant the seeds of their ruin or force them to commit federal crimes. I did not force Julian to gamble, or Preston to steal, or Yvonne to lie. I simply stopped protecting them. I stopped serving as the silent, invisible shock absorber for their toxic, destructive choices. I stepped out of the way and allowed the natural consequences of their own actions to finally catch up to them. They built their entire lives on a foundation of gasoline and arrogance, and I simply refused to put out the fire anymore. This is the reality of true generational wealth. The elites in those boardrooms, the people who actually hold the power in this world, they understand something that my mother and sister never could. Generational wealth is not just about handing down trust funds or holding the deeds to historic estates. It is about character. It is about the resilience to build something from the ground up and the ironclad loyalty to protect the people who stand beside you in the trenches. It is about recognizing value, respecting intellect, and never confusing a designer label with actual undeniable power. My family worshipped the illusion of wealth. I mastered the execution of it. The heavy oak door of my office swings open quietly. Sterling steps into the room. He has shed his suit jacket, his sleeves rolled up to the elbows, radiating that familiar dark and lethal authority that grounds me entirely. In his hands, he carries 2 crystal flutes and a chilled bottle of vintage champagne. He walks across the Italian marble and stops right beside me. He hands me a glass, his dark eyes locking onto mine with a profound, unwavering respect. He does not ask about the voicemail. He does not need to. We operate on the exact same frequency, a silent mutual understanding of the empires we run and the liabilities we have buried. A successful morning, Sterling asks, his deep voice vibrating with quiet amusement. Extremely, I reply, turning to face the skyline once more, the crystal flute cool against my fingers. We stand shoulder to shoulder looking out over the vast pulsing city that we actively control. The sunlight catches the diamond on my finger, a brilliant flash of undeniable victory. I take a slow sip of the champagne, letting the crisp, sharp taste settle on my tongue. I think about the scared, exhausted woman who used to hide in the catering kitchens, desperate for a sliver of validation from a family that actively despised her. She is gone. She has been completely eradicated. I look out over the concrete and feel a genuine, powerful smile spreading across my face. I did not just survive the fire they tried to throw me in. I own the building it burned down in, and I am never giving up the keys. The ultimate lesson here is that your worth is never determined by those who actively try to tear you down, even if they share your blood. True power is not just about financial success. It is about having the profound courage to walk away from toxic family dynamics and build your own empire. You do not owe your abusers a seat at the table you built. Letting go of the guilt they conditioned you to feel is your ultimate victory. Have you ever had to cut off toxic relatives to protect your peace? Share your experience below, and please subscribe.